It was funny though, Kyle. I feel like I was like panicking this morning, like, man, I need to just get my rankings down. And then I was like, I'm like, wait, I know every single player on every single team. Like, 80% of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, maybe I'm fine.
On game 5. What a play. From a championship, from a Clipper celebration. Start the party, Los Angeles! Your Dodgers have won the World Series!
That's it! It's a World Series win for LA! They've done it!
I told Nick when he got up there that he should imagine that Rob Manfred's face was on the baseball. And the next pitch, he lit it up over the fence, baby. All right.
That's the way you do it.
End it right there.
You play the guitar on the MTV.
For David Cruz, he takes off, pitch swing and a miss, thrown out, it's wide.
Money for nothing.
He stayed on the bag. It's a career high 4 steals for 4-4.
Let me tell you, damn guys ain't done.
Bryce Harper, 2 home runs already tonight. And he's coming up here with the bases full.
Yeah, so deep to right center field. No doubt about it. A 3-homer game. He catches it off with a grand slam.
We got to move these refrigerators. We got to move these color TVs.
First game back with the Orioles.
Holiday drills it. Right field. Down the line. Grand slam. The happiest of holidays. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, Jackson is here.
Fine.
Look at that.
I think it'll be alright. Griffin, I have tiers. Mine are like
You play the guitar on
basically just 2 big globs and then like 2 teams at the bottom. I don't think win.
That's kind of how I have 4, 2, 6, 1. Like something like that.
I have 2 teams at the bottom also, but I'm curious to know if they're the same teams.
It's me.
I think one's obvious. I'm wondering who the other one is.
Go find out.
Exactly. I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too. Alright, well, we get started and then we'll just go.
Also, I don't know if we want to look at Kyle. I went through the last year. Remember how you guys did the free agent draft of like
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
picking people off waivers? I ended up tallying those. So we
Damn.
get results for that.
I've thought about that a few times over the past few months and then just forget to follow up or look at it. That's awesome. Thanks for doing that.
That's how I was until Mark Missigman was like talking about it. I was like, I beat you. Spoiler alert, I didn't.
But you weren't last, right?
Nah,
Nice.
but we'll get to it.
You want to do that first because it's smaller or do it at the very end?
Yeah, we can start with that. And,
Okay, I'll jokingly be like, all right, guys, here's the pod you've all been waiting for. We're going to break down the free agent drafts from last year early in the season.
How many trades do we have?
Huh?
Were there any trades cut off last week?
1 or 2 trades we got to break down too.
There was a pretty big trade I saw.
Yeah. I can't wait for Kyle to love it for you.
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting.
All right, let's do this. Now I'll get Kyle on like a note. We're starting at like 420. I'll just do. Here we are.
Let's hit it. Yeah, we're good. I'll probably just include all of it. Just it's funny.
Yeah,
yeah.
it's easier to do that. Just do that. All right.
Who cares?
What is happening, guys? Welcome back to the Bucher's Batch of Boys Fantasy Podcast. This is probably the most exciting show of the year. I'm joined by Kyle as always. What's going on, Kyle?
How's it going? Had a fun weekend. Saw Father John Misty with Bridget in DC, so I'm feeling pretty sleepy because it's all just like slow, like ballads and stuff. But yeah, interesting. I think I have my fill of hipster for the week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. We also got our league hipster and probably most common reoccurring guest. Welcome, Griffin.
Thank you. I spent the last week looking at ad drops and thinking about the league, and that's about it.
Yeah, me too, man. We're post the draft. We're less than a week away. This AI, and we're finally, as of yesterday, all the keepers are in too, so that's exciting. We actually know who everybody's keeping. We'll talk about that some, but I won't delay too much. This will be a long one. This is the most important part of the year in a lot of ways, probably the most fun one. We're going to break down last year's free agent drafts that a few people did in the beginning of the season. So if you guys remember, it was Kyle, Mark Missigman, Brendan, and Griffin. did two versions of 2 drafts of just free agents at the time back in April. Griffin has done us a lot of help here. He scored it all based on all the categories from last season. Griffin, do you have in front of you? I can pull it up if you don't. Quickly while you ramble for me, who the teams each were so everybody knows who had what.
I don't.
I'll look for that. You talk about something for 20 seconds.
All right. So it was Mark Missigman, Kyle, Brendan, and me. We were the only 4 who got to do it. If you're only watching, I guess I'll read off who everyone drafted. Maybe we can drop who actually is. But for Mark Missigman, he drafted Wilmer Flores, Ranger Suarez, Ian Hamilton, and Jerkson Profar. Kyle, you took Lance Lynn, Garrett Crochet, Hunter Renfro, and Willie Castro. Brendan took Max Kepler, Keaton Wynn, Ryan Noda, and Ryan Yarborough. And I took Sean Mania, Mike Soroka, Brandon Marsh, and Mark Canha. Before I go, who actually won? Do you guys want to take a guess? Maybe if you're listening, you can guess who won based on that.
You have any guesses, Kyle? I've seen it already, so I feel like it's not really fair if I guess.
I have not seen it. I think Mania is obviously pretty sweet. I think Crochet is, not too shabby. I do not know, right? So I'm not really sure.
So first, you won, Kyle.
Good job.
Second was Mark. Third was me, and last was Brendan.
How close was it?
So I did it like roto points from 4 to 1. You had 46 points. Mark had 42 points.
It was very good.
I had 39 points, and Brendan had 25.
Good job, Kyle. You won everything last year.
Thank you.
Double winner.
All right.
I mean, just lucky on Crochet.
Yeah, he was
I wish I picked him up. I wish I put my money where my mouth was.
Yeah, good job with draft him in that though. Do we want to do our couple little trades since we have the guy on who made the big one, or do we save it for the end?
Might as well get it out the way.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
We had maybe the biggest trade I can think of in a little bit. Probably since Corbin Carroll for Judge and Soto.
You mean for Ember Valdez, for Hilo Ramos, and Joe Ryan?
Yeah, that's the one. How do I share my screen? Can I do that on this?
You should be able to. I was trying to figure it out.
Okay, I'll race you too because I just opened up Fantrax too. For those of you watching at home, we're debuting a new system this time. This is no longer Zoom. Welcome to Skype until May.
The pod is sponsored by Skype.
They made us a better offer.
We follow the money.
I'm not sure we can. Oh, I can share screen. Here we go. Okay, I'm doing it.
Thank you.
So do you want to cut to the chase and do the big one first?
Yeah, so
give the people what they want.
Yeah, I can't
let's start off with the big one, Spencer Arrighetti for David Bednar. I think, Brendan, really smart move to shore up his relief pitching. If you look at his team, he has a lot of money, right? Probably, the most per roster spot of anyone. I haven't looked into that, but
I have to quit Skype. Sorry to interrupt you before I can share. It says it's a change that was not authorized before we started.
Yeah, I didn't authorize. I don't see anything. Shoot, I don't know.
Just say that's reserved for double winners. Sorry, Nick.
Yeah, Kyle's our first fantasy baseball in-season dual season champ. I mean, we can just say who they are. They know who they are. I don't need a 6 screen. Sorry, keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just effing around with the Bednar trade. But if we want to talk about that one randomly first, because that's the big one, of course. The Bednar trade. When I first saw it, I thought it was kind of odd. Like I've been making an effort to try to make people really value relief pitchers going into the season.
It works.
And so. I was happy to kind of see this kind of thing. Bednar's not cheap. I think he's like over $10.
He's 15.
So that, it is what it is. But I actually think upon looking at it more, it was really smart by Brendan he doesn't really have many ways to use his money. So if he's able to buy players that fit his needs, and he's really strong pretty much across the board, just didn't have relief, I think it's smart to go ahead and sell a starter that maybe you don't believe in quite as much. And, I think Nick also gets a young player who could emerge and improve on a good team. So this is a win-win. I think Brendan, it doesn't really matter how much Bednar costs. Like, he could be $25. And it really just allows Brendan more certainty going into the draft. So he can focus on players that he actually does care about. So I thought it was just a smart play given the circumstances.
Good points. What about you, Griff? You agree, disagree?
Yeah, I agree. It makes sense. It's a high upside, cheap starter for a closer who's probably right at value. Maybe he goes a little more, maybe he goes a little less. But it kind of shores up Brendan's relief core in case Felix Bautista has any question marks beginning of the season. I was kind of surprised how high David Bednar actually is going. That was kind of like a blind spot for me.
Yeah.
He's kind of pushing up, and he seems like locked and loaded, ready to start the season as the closer. So seems reasonable. Kind of just moving around low surplus value pieces.
Yeah, I feel like they're both like right around value, and I think it's probably a slight win in my mind for Brendan for the reasons you guys just said. I don't want to add anything else, but I think it's a significant win for Nick, just because even if Arrigetti's nothing special, he might not be, but I don't really see any scenario where Nick's going to care about Bednar a year from now, and he could care about Arrigetti.
Yeah, it seems like two players who could have been dropped by both. Like, it wouldn't have surprised me if Brendan said I have 6.
Be clear too, but especially when you're in Nick's spot, you're not going to. There's no scenario probably to keep Bednar next year, and he's got the multitude of closers. Let's do the next one that is not the biggest one yet, the most far back of them. Joe Ryan and Heliot Ramos for Framber Valdez. So this is a Griffin one. Kyle, you're not Griffin. Whose side did you like here? This is Griffin and Mark Minnis.
And you guys can see my screen now, right?
It's the Cliffs. It
Sorry,
might be your background.
You cannot see it?
Yeah, I just see like cliff faces over water.
Okay.
It's a cool background, dude.
Yeah, I can describe it for people at home. It's brown cliffs overfacing water.
Some water or grass and stuff too. There's a little bit of forestry, it looks like.
Yeah. That's too bad. I'm trying to share it right now, but all right.
It's okay, well, buddy. We'll figure this out.
Yeah. So the trade, I feel like Framber is a pretty big piece. I think I've been really into all the stuff plus stuff, and Framber is just kind of a ground baller, boring guy, and I think he's really good and he accumulates stats. He's the type of guy I kind of like, despite my typical strategy where he doesn't really fit in. And if you really want to take it a step further, Joe Ryan even further fits the bill. Joe Ryan's the type of guy, if you look past over the maybe 3 years, look at like strikeout minus walk rate, Joe Ryan sticks out like a sore thumb. He's a really good pitcher. He's just not really good behind the scenes, all the stuff that I like to look at. But I don't think that really should really scare you away as much as people are getting afraid of Joe Ryan. So it's interesting because it's kind of like two similar guys, in my opinion, who just are really good from a results perspective, but maybe aren't good under the hood. And then you're also getting Ramos thrown in. So I think Griffin benefits because he gets the higher floor player. I think Mark wins because he gets a hitter who's exciting, and he gets a player who's kind of similar in Joe Ryan, and might save a little bit on the pitching, right? Framber's a little more expensive.
I think it is. Is it 20 to 25? I'll check that to make sure.
I think it's 19 to 25.
19 to 25, okay.
So I think it's a smart trade for both. Like I think Griffin's making a stronger push right now to just play for this year. He has his team pretty much ironed out. So to upgrade and say, hey, I'll throw Ramos at you to get a better Joe Ryan in Framber, I think that makes sense. Makes sense for Mark also to get a little upside.
Yeah, I think you're pretty much right. I think it's pretty funny too, because I agree with the way you're talking about. Framber and Ryan aren't that different as players; they're kind of similar, but they're just such different, like how they get there. Like Framber's such a ground ball pitcher. Joe Ryan has tons of fly balls and not many walks, and probably the higher strikeout upside the two. Like I think Framber is just a more safe high SP2, low SP1. Joe Ryan could definitely be that good or better, but I think it's not quite something I would say is likely. And with the $6 you're saving, you get to add for the same exact amount of money total, Heliot Ramos, who is, I think, probably a little bit of a surplus at $6. So I like it for Mark. I like it for you too, Griff. Not really a fun take on that. Pretty much the same. Is there anything we're missing in the way what happened? Did you reach out to Mark? Did Mark reach out to you?
I think I reached out to Mark and made that offer. For me, it was just I have a pretty full pitching staff, but it's relatively risky, like Hunter Green, Luis Heel. So I just thought, trading a small piece in order to tier up slightly to get a more safe pitcher. It was just that simple. Wanted the floor, like you guys were saying.
Makes sense to me.
I feel like, I don't know if it's biased because I traded for him. I feel like Framber Valdez might be like one of the most underrated players in the game. Yeah. Like I didn't realize how good he's been.
You, my buddy Nick Pollock, think that too.
I like him then. But yeah, that's about it.
Cool. All right, well, Griffin was not only making that move. Griffin made one other small kind of tack-on move at the end of that. This is Griffin and Raymond. So Griffin gives away Shohei Ohtani and gets back Luis Rengifo and Jarren Duran. That is wild. Kyle, what do you think about that one?
I was kind of surprised. I think Ohtani conservatively is worth like, I don't know, 80, $75 to $80, right? So if you add, I think more than that too, Griffin. So if you take just 80, a conservative number, and you throw on whatever he's kept for, so like, I don't even remember, is it 35?
46.
46.
So just throw on 46 plus surplus value, so call it an extra $40. So we're now talking about a $120 player. So take like $120 and compare that to like Jarren Duran, because I think Rengifo is roughly at cost. I don't know if you're in love with Rengifo, but Jarren Duran, I think, he's one of the best keepers in the entire league. I think maybe $11, and he's probably a $50 player, something like that. So, you could call that like $80-$90 of actual value. But it's just tough to trade away Ohtani. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah, I think it's wild. Kyle just did the exact thing I did when I was looking at everybody's rosters earlier this week. I mean, Kyle, just because you brought it up, or Griffin, you can play too. Using HEC and the Bad X equally weighted, our exact league format besides saves and holds and the way we weight them. Yep. But all keepers factored in, so inflation's included in this across every team after the drops are made. Who do you think has more surplus value at current salary, Duran or Ohtani?
Ohtani.
I agree.
It's close, but it is Ohtani, which is just wild. That said, obviously, I mean, Duran's keepable for longer. Ohtani's going to appreciate faster and faster every year. Duran's got a couple really cheap years in him still. And Rengifo, I think he's basically at cost, it said, but I kind of think he's probably, just personally, this is just my opinion, a little bit under. He will play everywhere. I feel like there's no way to factor that in. He's multiple position eligibility. And I don't think, assuming he plays every day and hits, not in the bottom 3 or so of the lineup. And if you have the Angels who are injured for him to stay healthy, like Trout and the ones at the top, like he's probably going to not hurt you anywhere and be a huge help in steals. I mean, he was at 78 games. He stole like 30 bases or whatever. Like he was on like a 50-plus steal and base pace.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Like, it could be a really big help as a rabbit, which I know is a weird skill set, but he's unlike some of the other rabbits where he's going to hurt you other places. Plus, he plays everywhere. So I personally, because of that factor, I'm a little bit higher than the cost itself should be. That said, I mean, I'm sorry, Griffin. I think Raymond wins it slightly, like 55-45. I think getting Ohtani is, I don't know, it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as I made the deal, I didn't think anyone would favor my side on it.
I don't think it's bad, though. I think it's about as – I mean, like you said, or maybe Kyle said, I'm sorry, I don't remember what you brought it up. Like, Duran's probably within the top 6 or 7 keepers in the league as far as surplus value, especially when you factor in a little bit of a bonus for the fact he's so cheap. You have him for extra years. Like, Ohtani is all that value, but next year, unless Duran really falls off, he's probably going to have more surplus value at cost. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one there. It's a super interesting move though, because like Griffin's trying to win, and Raymond is still only starting year 2 of taking over the hardest possible thing we've ever had someone take over this league, which is an expansion team. I mean, we talked with Nick last week, and he didn't have amazing keepers handed to him, but he had some guys. Like Raymond had, I think, just the free agents, right? We didn't give him anything. And a year later, he's trading for the best player in fantasy and trying to go for it, which is super interesting.
It's kind of, yeah, it's kind of scary going to the point where, Nick, you shared with me a list of the winners over the years. And for a long time, it was Nick, Ray, Nick, Ray, Nick, Ray. I'm like, okay, I guess this is why.
It wasn't all the same, though. It's way, way more competitive now than it was 8-10 years ago.
But even if the year doesn't go quite as well as, you know, we would hope for Ray, if he doesn't have really the chance just because he didn't have a great starting place with his team and he's building it as fast as he can, Ohtani is probably a better chip to play. And I think the league is better with having, you know, people like Griffin in it where, okay, like Ohtani's moving. Like this sets a precedent. You can trade Ohtani. It's not that.
I can't wait to watch for the exact trade happen back, basically Duran for Ohtani Memorial Day.
Yeah. So I think it's really cool. I like it. I like that you did it. I think, you know, your team is obviously going to compete regardless. I think you have a really good team, but I did move your team down a little bit without Ohtani. It's hard not to, but what?
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, I think his team is still better than mine, but I think I think you can't really get Ohtani in the draft this year. You know, Lindor's there, Ramirez is there.
Yeah.
But I think Griffin's already spent a lot of his money.
Well, Kyle, you brought up a good point too. Like in your just when you're in your mind's eye, kind of ranking the teams. What if just like spitballing here, we spend a little bit of time now since we're done with the trades, just ranking the teams and how we think they'll sort of be going into the draft. No prep or anything, but just like we just kind of talk through it.
Talk through how we're thinking about it.
Like mental power ranks. Like if we were to rank all 14 teams in the league, just without really putting too much thought into it, where would we rank them?
In order?
Yeah, like in order from 1 to 14, maybe some tiers, maybe some notes, as we're making up as we go along.
Yeah, so I think to start off.
Is this a segue?
Yeah,
I think to
We're
start off.
segueing.
And do we actually want to start with number 1 or do we want to start at the bottom?
Yeah, good question. Griffin, you're our guest. I think last year we started at the top. Do you want to start at the top or the bottom, though?
I would start at the.
Here's my number 17. And
Let's
also,
start from the back.
when I give my opinions on these, I will also give some notes from Zach and Raymond Zink both. They did full ranks as well. Thanks, guys.
All right. Want to start from the back?
Yeah.
Let's mix it up.
All right. So I have 4 tiers, and I have 1 team in my last tier, and that is New Nick.
Yeah.
I guess I can start with my thoughts, but I feel like it's kind of obvious. You know, you take over a team that didn't have amazing keepers, and I mean, really, when did this team stop making moves last year? Like May, maybe April.
Yeah.
So like he kind of has a team that hasn't been upkept very well, and I think, you know, there's just no standouts really. But I think he's doing a good job of trying to get some cheap upside who can carry him for a couple of years, but it's just a tough place to start from.
Yeah. Hey, when looking at surplus value versus remaining budget, just based on projections and option calculators, it's a testament to Nick, because I agree with what you said, Griffin. I think he's taking over. I think Raymond's situation last year was harder, but besides that, of the last like 6 or 7 openings we had, like all the way back to Roman replacing Raymond like 4 or 5 years ago, I don't think we've had a worse spot than Nick's jumping in on. I think it's one of the hardest ones. So even though he's last, it's no, statement on Nick. Just goes without saying. But as far as surplus value goes on Nick's team, his 2 highest surplus value guys are 2 of the guys he just traded for. It's the pitchers Flaherty and Lopez. Lopez being the highest one, which is crazy. Like, good job, Nick, is what I'm trying to say. Like, already in a better spot than this roster was not even a month and a half ago. Good job. And you have tons of money. I mean, draft a couple good deals, draft a couple of centerpieces, maybe draft one or two of the really expensive guys and sell them off. You got some options.
No, I'm surprised you have the $1 pitchers above Ober. I think $11 Ober would be. I think I have him as the best keeper on his team.
I don't know if this when we had started yet. Just for everybody listening, when I talk about the surplus value thing, I just averaged the bad X projections and ATC equal parts using our scoring settings on the Fangraph Action Calculator. And Ober is $12 of surplus value. Flaherty is also 12. Lopez is 14.
I think. Go ahead, Griffin.
I was just gonna say, why do you average the bad X with ATC? Like, doesn't ATC aggregate all of it and like include
ATC
the bad X?
Bad X, but it's with like a bunch of other ones too. Those are just my personal two ways to value guys, and they're not that different, honestly. I probably could have just used either one. I don't think any significant differences are across either one. It's basically just doing ATC, I guess, with extra weight for Cardi.
I think that's really smart because the bad X like usually wins the best projection. And then when it doesn't, it's ATC, and the only reason is because ATC is an aggregate. But what's funny is that kind of means that over time, the bad X is actually the best projector. It's just that it's like kind of weighted down by other stuff in the ATC. So I think that's smart. Overweight, bad X, ATC.
Yeah. And Griffin made a good point there too. Like again, I don't think when I was looking for the differences, anybody, even at the highest end, is more than like $3 or $4 different. It really didn't need to be done. Probably, I just like that best.
Regardless of what projection system you use, like you could use any of them. I think one thing that you guys have probably noticed too, as a league, we historically spend a little bit more on pitchers than their like maybe their inherent value or their intrinsic value. But it doesn't really matter, right? Like it kind of just matters how the league actually does value the player. It's all relative, in my opinion. Right?
Yeah. Where'd you have Nick, Kyle, by the way, too? Sorry if you already said it. I don't know if I heard it.
Yeah, so, I mean, nothing crazy new to add. I did have Nick in the last place. Sadly, this has nothing to do with Nick's trades or anything he's done so far. I think he's added a lot of value to his team. So just same thing that you guys said. So continue, the good work.
Nick and, or pardon me, not Nick, Zach and Raymond also had that. Raymond gave me some notes. I'll read his quirks as we go along as well. Nick 2, 14. Fresh face with a blank slate, ! Wasn't given the best team to work with, but was wise to trade for Jenkins and keep Adley, Robles, Flaherty, Lopez, and Profar. Discounting due to lack of track record in league, but could rise fast in rankings. Proactively trading is a strong indicator of future success.
Strong words from a strong man.
Yeah. And Zach had the same. So that will probably be the only time there's any real agreement, I imagine.
It's like Zach had the exact same quote.
Yeah, Zach said it first. I guess maybe Raymond copied him. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess let's do it where Griffin gives us now is 13. And instead of us giving our 13s, we'll just say where we had whoever he names.
Got it.
Well, I was going to say, I kind of wanted your guys' 13 since you guys have a tier of 2 teams, right? Didn't you say? Your last year has 2 teams in it?
I didn't tier probably as quickly as you did, but yeah, I have 2 teams that I think are the furthest away from basically everybody but these 2 teams I think could legitimately have more than like a 2 or 3% chance of winning, which I know sounds small, but when there's 14 teams, no one has more than like 15, 20 probably. And these 2 I don't think can win barring like kind of a miracle. And basically everybody after them I think has more than a 1 in 30 or 1 in 35 chance of winning.
I feel the same way. I didn't really do tiers, but these 2, it was pretty easy for me to kind of start with. So I feel pretty certain about these 2.
True. So I'll give my 13th, but like I have a big tier that includes 2, 4, 6, 7 teams.
Okay, so basically,
this team's in a big tier.
Include this guy with the rest of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think all these teams are gonna be close. But 13th, I have Brad.
Brad, okay.
Where do you guys have him?
I have Brad 13.
Oh, okay. So we picked the right one.
And then while Kyle's finding his, I will say though, Brad is. Did Raymond not rank Brad? Oh, Raymond has Brad 9. So Raymond is the high guy on Brad. Let me see what Zach had on that.
I have Brad 9.
Okay, so never mind. Hey, look, maybe you and that's funny. You have them exactly at 9 together.
Yeah.
Exactly at 13 together. Let me see. Zach could be the tiebreaker. Let me see where Zach put him. Zach has him 11, so basically splitting the difference. So ECR Brad's at true rank is probably like 12 or 11 and a half.
His ATC.
Yeah, I'll average these out maybe if I have time. I guess you go ahead first, Griffin, though, and then I'll throw stuff in.
So I feel like, I mean, he has a lot of offensive upside in a way. Matt Olson, kind of steady. Jordan Westberg has a lot of upside. Mark Vientos could hit 40 homers. Zach Neto, super underrated season that no one stops talking about. Matt Shaw's a good prospect. Matt McLean was super interesting, and Julio is Julio. So offense, plenty of upside. It's really just his pitching, and that's probably the easier thing to fix anyways. But Blanco, Lodolo, and Gavin Williams, it's probably the second weakest staff in the league, maybe.
I think he's actually starting from the worst starting position spot, personally. But yeah, to your point,
I think so.
He's only keeping 3 pitchers, so he has some money. He can buy some pitchers, yeah.
But again, I don't see this team in the same tier as Nick, because if Julio returns to 2023 Julio, same with Olsen, this is a team that could be. I see all the other 13 teams could be in the money.
I think that's a fair way to say it. When I say their own tier, it's mostly just not 2 individual tiers. I'd probably price Nick like 80 or 100 to 1, and Brad like 45 to 1 maybe. But I mostly agree too. I mean, again, I sort of explained how I was doing my surplus value stuff. Brad's closer to some of the other teams than he is to Nick in surplus value across the roster. Do you guys want to just take a guess who you think his highest surplus value player is?
Vientos.
What do you think, Kyle?
That's probably right. And then Cal Raleigh would maybe be my second choice, which is kind of crazy because it's $9. That's expensive for a catcher, but the projection values are usually really high on catchers.
Yeah, everybody you named just now is in his top 5. His actual highest one, though, based on the projections, is Julio at $18 of surplus value, and then Vientos is 16. So he's second. But like you said, I mean, especially with teams where there's players like Vientos who there's such a small sample on, like it's unlikely he is exactly projections. He's probably better or worse. Like I think players who've been in the league for a long time, like Ryan McMahon, will just probably hit their projections. There's a good chance Vientos is either not his second best one and either the best or like 6th best. But I think Brad has an okay offensive base too. I agree. What do you think? I mean, you had Brad a little bit higher, where me and Griffin kind of missing something.
Yeah, I'll be a Brad defender. So I'll go out on a limb. I'll say
Brad.
I'll say if Brad's offensive start here can all finish above like the 50th percentile outcome, if they can go, into their positive projections, I think he could win the league based off of his offense. Now, that's kind of forgetting the other side of the game here. And yeah, I think pitching is an obvious weak spot for Brad. That's why I have him 9th. I think his hitters, if you look at it, they're not cheap. Like Olsen, $46. But you just made the point, Nick, with Julio at $18 of surplus. He has a lot of decent value and guys who I actually really like on the hitting side. So that's really all I have to talk about on the positive side, because it really is the hitting that I think Brad has a really nice situation. And really, one other piece I'll just make reference to. Sometimes it's kind of nice to have the opposite problem, right? A lot of people, I think, have a decent pitching crew going into the draft. Brad doesn't. So Brad's going to be working on something a little bit different than the rest of the league going into the draft. If I had his team, that's what I would be focusing on. And there could be a little bit of an advantage there for Brad, zigging while others zag, right? So I also personally like to underspend on pitching sometimes. I think you can pick up a couple of, $1 waivers here and there. And, if they stink, you cut them. It's just a low cost way of dart throws and chances to pick up something that really makes a difference. So I like Brad's team overall. I do agree with what you're saying. I think he needs to work on his pitching, and I'm sure he knows that.
Yeah, you're a game theory point. Sorry, you go ahead, Griffin.
So one thing is I feel like this is probably the best second to worst team we've ever had in our league, which says a lot about like how competitive it is. And I also I don't think anyone would disagree. Like if you had to pick between having a bad offense or a bad pitching staff entering the draft, like everyone would rather have the bad pitching staff.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like you can't really fix a bad offense in the draft, but you can fill out a pitching staff enough to finish 5th place with this offense, at least,
Yeah.
Completely agree. And Kyle, I love that point though. Before we move off of Brad now, that Brad's in a great spot with that sense, and he's been pretty active most of the years he's been in this league. As far as like, he will have more easy trade partners should he want to go that route, both before and after the draft. And also just in the draft, as far as who's going to be targeting what. A lot of the other high dollar teams, Brad's in the upper middle part of remaining budget left, are not quite as thin pitching. So
exactly.
Let me read you before we move off of him too. Raymond's quick for Brad. Brad, 9. Great Brad team. Shaw, Julio, Vientos, Neto, Westberg are exciting. We'll need to secure a strong pitching staff to contend, or, ride the glob. So, Raymond's
Ride it, baby.
And Brad, remember to send thank you notes to Raymond and Kyle and Zach, I guess, is in the middle. And then when you want to burn down houses, it's me and Griffin. So who is your 12th team, Griff?
I have Stan 12. It's just, well, wait, first, where do you guys have them?
I have Jack 12.
Jack.
This is really funny.
That's weird. So,
and it was also really surprising to me. But yeah, that's where I have Jack 12. Let me see where Raymond Jack did. You guys start talking.
It was wild to me that I put him
12.
All right, Jack, you really are a 12 then.
Jack, reach out to Zach though. He has you at 9. He likes you the best.
You should be a Seattle fan. Seahawks, 12th man.
That's wild.
Yeah, I felt bad when I put Jack down for 12 because he is just consistently competing every year. It seems like he just puts together this really good team that I look at the team, I'm like, yeah, it's okay. And then you look at all of his category stats and they're all really good. So I think this is a classic case where Jack is probably pretty good at assigning value, and he's not keeping players that are over value. And it looks a little barren right now, but that doesn't mean that he can't pull together a really good season. So it's tough. I did try to weight kind of what I expect out of each team into my rankings. And I think this is kind of an unfair one where I have Jack. So just calling that out. I do have him 12. It seems like the right decision, but it also seems kind of low. So.
Dude, yeah, if we're betting over-unders, even though I have him 12, this is the first of the 3 we've talked about where I'm confidently smashing the over. Mostly because I think probably Jack will, just because he's been so consistent for years now, even if he's like truly not a contending team this year, he'll still do the intricate middle things and finish like 9th. I don't see many scenarios where Jack actually finishes in the bottom 2 or 3. I just think as far as when I'm doing this, where I would rank situations I want to try to take over, Jack is not one of my more favorite ones. And mostly it's because we can't just say Jack did a bad job setting this up. I mean, Jack went for it last year and traded away a lot of guys to both me and Mark and some other teams on the fringe with him, and then jumped us and won a lot more money because of it. So Jack did this in a way to go for it last year, and he almost won. I mean, if Kyle wasn't the global last year, Jack would have been close to winning, and he did end up doing a lot better than he would have otherwise. So, Jack, I understand how you got here. I kind of trust you to get yourself out of it, but right now you are 12 for me.
He's kind of the anti-Brad.
Yeah.
You look 2 great pitchers and then kind of barren offense. So it'll be interesting to see him duke it out.
You guys want to hear Raymond on this one?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's been the highlight of the day so far for me.
This is the first time there's any all caps. Stan the man, 12. Schemes, all caps, but no exclamation point.
Schemes.
Alonzo, Bryce Miller, core, pretty good. Hard to get excited at other kept values, but has plenty of draft day capital to play with. And he does. Jack has close to the most money. He's up there in the top 2 or 3 as far as money remaining. He has a lot of roster spots to fill, but he still has a really high max bid and can afford to get a lot of good filler players and maybe a stud or 2.
One last thing about his team is, I guess as we go, you can think if you have anyone higher, but I think I would have Paul Skeens as the most valuable player in our league, like given keeper and everything.
I just did the exercise. Do you want to guess who it is? Do you think it's Skeens?
Well, I mean long term. Like he'd be the most valuable asset, but for this
He's
year,
your first player. He's your most valuable one personally. I think I agree with you for what it's worth there. He's not number 1 overall in the league. He's number 2. But I think I agree with you there.
Is it Ketel
Connor.
Marte?
He is $7 of less surplus value than Schemes. And he's more expensive too. No, he's not. A hint would be it's another pitcher. Is quote unquote this year the highest excess value?
Oh, Tariq?
Yeah, Skubal's the highest excess value when you average out Cardi and ATC. But for what it's worth, I would probably also take Schemes and then probably Skubal too. Any last thoughts on Jack? All right, let's move on.
Flip out the back, Jack.
Again, Jack, you want to be angry at all of us in Raymond, and then Zach is your buddy.
All right, speaking of Ray, I have Ray 11th.
This is my first time not being exactly with Griffin. I have Roman 11th.
Well, wait, that was the spoiler. Aren't you? Where do you have Ray? You just spoiled.
Now, whoops. We'll cut that in post-production. I have Raymond.
Oh, put a beep.
Censor.
I could, yeah.
Raymond 9.
I have Ray 8.
Okay. Raymond has Raymond.
Also, you guys should do some Raymond talk. I'm gonna just do a quick bathroom break. You can keep talking. I'll be right back.
That's fine.
Okay.
Well, we can also just wait. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, because you'll miss.
No, just keep talking.
Yeah,
We'll talk about stuff other than Ray.
I'm prepared to talk about Ray.
When you come back, you just give us your input.
Yeah, we'll just chat.
This would be a commercial break normally, but we don't have those anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I have one thing. I don't know. I mean, maybe we should do this with Kyle too. But I have like players I was surprised were kept and surprised were cut.
Let's switch gears real quick and name a couple before he's back.
All right. So surprising cuts. I was kind of surprised. I'll just go through the whole list. It's like not ranked at all. Okay. It was Ozzie Albies, Lane Thomas, Andres Jimenez, Kumar Rocker, Walker Buehler, Kyle Bradish, Michael Bush, Brandon Pfaadt, Michael Tolia, Taj Bradley, Colton Cowser, Shane Boz, Nolan Jones, Colt Keith, Jeremy Pena, Matt Chapman, Ezekiel Tovar, Ian Happ, Jason Foley, Christian Yelich, and Adolis Garcia.
That's a good list, and it's longer than I expected. Although I agree with just roughhousing here, like 65% of it probably. I think without you saying them all again, we don't have a way to show the list right now because only Kyle can share apparently. I think for me, Toglia, and of those first couple you named too, there's another one that I was like, oh wow, I'm surprised that wasn't a keep.
For me, I would have done Ozzie Albies, I think.
Okay,
but
actually,
that's also
the only ones I don't think I agree with. How much would Albies have been?
I think you're like 45-ish. It probably would be right at value. And I probably wouldn't have actually with my team because I'm full of middle infielders. But
yeah, I get it. When you're on the team Nick has with not much money contributed places, I understand why you might. You want to see what Albies? I have it next to me just because I thought he might keep him. I did it before Nick released his thing. Albies is worth 42 with inflation included, it says. But Albies is another one that's kind of tough to project there because Albies, I don't know, I didn't write down how many at-bats they were giving him, but because of the injuries too the last 3 years and then the general underperforming last year, I feel like he's kind of like what I was saying earlier, where he probably beats that or doesn't hit it by a good bit, like within $5 of value. Either he's a lot better or a lot worse, probably.
I think you said Michael Tolia.
Tolia was one of my big ones. There's another one you mentioned. Can you name your first like 7 again? It was someone early.
Lane Thomas, Andres Jimenez, Kumar Rocker.
One where I don't even. This is not the thing I'm going off of that because Mark declared much earlier, so I didn't even write him down anymore. But I probably would have kept Lane Thomas too.
Oh no, Lane was Brad, I think.
Or Brad, pardon me then. Okay, I guess I did it after Brad had already cut him. That's another one where I guess in Brad's spot, I think it's even like I understand why Nick might not a little bit more than why Brad might not. I probably would have kept Lane Thomas. I would have had Brad 12 probably. Brad, you could have helped get my vote.
Welcome back, Kyle.
Kyle, you're muted.
I don't know why I'm big now.
You're not.
Oh, no, you're not big.
I'm big on mine. Are you guys all big on your own?
Yeah, on mine, I'm here. It's
on mine, I'm the bigger one. You're fine.
Okay.
I guess when we edit or when we download it, I wonder who's going to be big on that.
I don't know.
Okay. Let me quickly, since we were talking about Raymond, you said you had him where, Kyle?
8.
Okay.
8 overall.
And for Munn himself, he is 6th. So Raymond, write Raymond a thank you note. Let me see where Zach had you real quick.
Also, just to add, I think Raymond ranked himself there before he traded for Ohtani, so he might have bumped himself up, right? Or was that?
It was the day after.
True.
Yeah. That'd be wild if he ranked himself 6 before Ohtani. Zach put him 9. So Zach and I are exactly the same. Kyle's 1 spot higher. Griffin, you have him 2 below me. So as the low man on Raymond, what are your thoughts? You hate Jarren Duran, is that it?
Yeah, there's just not a ton to win this year outside of Ohtani and Crochet. It's just a lot of pieces who are so young and so far away. Like, I think his third best player right now might be Junior Caminero. And, Caminero is great. He's, very valuable keeper. And going like top 80 overall this year.
Top 75 hitter or top 75 player even this year.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks, So
notable at surplus value, guys, just according to the list I did together. You guys think, well, I already told you Ohtani's higher than most people, so you probably just guess Ohtani. Ohtani's his most valuable surplus guy. You guys were talking, Kyle was, I don't know if it was before we started technically recording here or not, how far you'd value Ohtani. Oh, you did, as you were doing the trade breakdown. Ohtani, according to both those systems together as a hitter and pitcher in one spot, is worth 87. So, and that's with our other keepers all included. So and when I say it inflates it, there also obviously are some keepers that thinks are negative values. So it might be inflated less than you might think by a little bit. I sure found it to be the case when I was looking at it. I might pay another few bucks personally, but Ohtani is I think it's 87.
I think also
$31 of surplus with Crochet. He has between 8 and 12 with both Steele and Jared Jones. He has Caminero and Cruz on offense, both also more than $5, but less than 10. Actually, Caminero's at 11, so he's more than 10. Caminero's probably his second best hitting keeper, it thinks. And I think Raymond, like I was saying, Jack, I don't think there's any scenario Jack finishes 12 personally. Raymond, I have a couple spots higher than you. I think it is very possible he beats that. Like he does. You mentioned he has a decent amount to do in the draft. He has 12 roster spots to fill with $205. Now, some of the ones he's already got filled are guys like Kobe Mayo, and they might not play every day or much at all in the beginning, so you might have to fill more than some other people would who technically don't have that spot done yet. That said, I feel like I trust him to draft. I think it's impossible he actually finishes around like 9 or 10 or 11, wherever we have him, each of us. I think he's either going to go for it all the way now that he has Ohtani and finish in the top half, like 6 or 7, or he's going to realize early on it's not the way to do it and probably tank and like be below someone like Jack, I think. What do you think, Kyle?
Yeah, I think you're both right. I think Ray, I have Ray 8, so I guess I'm a little higher than you both. Ray has consistently made some really smart moves in trades. I think giving up Duran is a big piece. I still think it's really smart to get Ohtani, regardless of whether he ends up competing this year or not. And I think Ray is smart enough to do what you just nailed, Nick. Like he'll sell if he wants to, right? And Ohtani is a great piece to sell, not just as a 1-year rental, but you'll keep him next year too. So that's a win. There's a lot of wins with Ray, and I'm the high man, so I'll just say a couple things that I think are a little bit tough on his team. I think there's a few players, like Kobe Mayo is a good example of one who is really exciting, and I think also being around here, like you want him to do really well. But I think $11 is a little expensive for, I think, someone who's still the top prospect, but hasn't really proved it yet and doesn't necessarily have a good path or opportunity either. So I think there are some players where, like, yeah, Dylan Cruz, that's one of the better long-term keepers in the league. He is playing. He could actually go 20-30 pretty easily next year. So that's great. It's just tough to keep other players around the same dollar value who I think bring your team down. So I would actually like his team a lot more had he cut a few of those players. Kerstad, I think, is another one. So just calling out some specific players, but overall, I think Ray has a good team. Still some things to figure out on the pitching side, in my opinion, but I think there's no issue having that problem going into the draft. I think, if you make that a focus, you can get out just fine.
When I was making my own rankings, I didn't adhere super strictly, but I did loosely follow just total surplus value across all players kept. And Raymond is the biggest deviation I had because if you score him with no penalties and just only include big surpluses, Raymond actually is, I think, the 5th most surplus value across everybody. And that's only with me counting if it's more than $2 or $3 of surplus. So if it's close, I'd matter. Like, for example, on my team, projections this year, Acuna is actually like $1 or so negative value according to these two things. So, like, for example, on my team, I don't even factor Acuna in. Now, if you factor in negative values, Raymond drops to the middle. But even with that, he's still higher than where I have him. So I think Raymond's a really sort of interesting one. He was hard for me to rank. Before we move off of him, too, let me quickly give you Raymond's thoughts on Raymond. 6, Raymond. I'm biased, but Ohtani helps. Good foundation for strong pitching staff with Crochet, Jones, Steele. Might contend if young bats can take next step. That's sort of what we all said, I guess. Not really as much, but kind of.
I mean, if guys like Kobe Mayo and Kerstad are all of a sudden top 120 players, yeah, that's easy. It's just,
I agree, especially once you have Ohtani now, and I think you fancy yourself a fringe contender. I am surprised you kept guys like Mayo and Kerstad. There's at least one other one without looking at his team. I have my power ranks up, not the teams right now, just because those dollars probably could help you more in the auction if you're trying to go for it.
Oh, can I quickly give him a compliment sandwich?
Yeah.
I like how Raymond is willing to like make moves that are bold, and I think that's how you win is you make moves that like you feel like are right, and you don't worry about how they're perceived or how they really turn out in the end. It's more process over results.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm surprised he did keep Nick Gonzalez for $6. Like, he's not on my radar at all. I know he like had a decent second half or something last year, but him, Norby, Myers, Kerkering, I'm just kind of surprised they were kept.
Yeah, this is just my own guess, but sometimes I wonder if the AL, NL only has kind of shrouded Ray's mind into like, picking up the relevance of players that are more fringe. We're like, hey, you could totally get a stud that way, right?
In some ways, I think sometimes too, just because you're watching like potential fringe players that might become mixed league viable, but I think you're probably right.
Well, it's kind of like, people who grew up in the Great Depression, it's like, ooh, an empty flour bag, I need to keep it. I think he kind of has that same kind of trauma from the AL League.
He's kind of like paying to ship it across country where it costs more than the flour bag, I think, with some of these prospects.
And it's like, oh no, I can't throw Nick Gonzalez back.
Also, I think your statement's super accurate, Griffin, but I don't know if I think it's a compliment sandwich. You said like a nice thing and then a bad thing, but there's just like a nice thing.
I like Ray.
Okay.
There we go. Sandwich complete.
Good deal. Any other Raymond thoughts before we move on? I think Raymond so far, if I'm just keeping track mentally, has the highest standard deviation.
Errol Cohen says those kind of players don't perform well.
That's true.
What's his skew? Is his skew positive or negative? I hate when people use words like that, positive or negative skew. I think he should use favorable or unfavorable skew, because positive and negative doesn't really give you the easy intuition as to like which way that is talking about.
I think based on the way Cohen does it, Raymond would be skewing positive since he's close with, like, he's congested up between 2 or 3 spots with us, then he is 6th for himself. So we're going to include his and Zach's equal ranks to ours as far as like ECR. He skews pretty positively there, I think.
So a positive skew, does that put you into a favorable tranche?
Yeah, he's in a good tranche, baby.
Okay.
Tranching in here. All right. Maybe.
So number 10, I have Mark Minnis.
Ooh, Sparky. Okay. Where'd you have him, Kyle?
I had Mark 11.
Oh, I'm the high guy on Mark. I have him 8. Let me see where Raymond and Zach had him. You guys start talking about him?
I have a compliment for Mark. Oh, go ahead, Griffin.
Yeah, I mean, you can start.
So my compliment was that, I don't have Mark in a great spot, but I think his pitching is going to be very underrated. I think there's a good chance that he could be a top 5 pitching team in our league. I think the addition of, Devin Williams and Munoz, I think, give him a lot of flexibility where, yes, he already has good pitchers. A lot of people are down on Burns this year. I think he'll still be pretty good. Another player who I think a lot of people are down on, I think he'll be decent. And so he has good pitchers that he can rely on. But I think having really solid closers this year with saves will give you the ability to be more flexible, be more nimble, stream and add when necessary. And I think there are elements of his hitting that there could be some negative surplus value, or you could at least be at the money or close to it on a couple of players that maybe you're not super in love with. But I think he still has a really solid core that if he adds to it the right way, I think could really give him a competing team. And this goes back to the point at the, I think, beginning of the pod. I have Mark 11, but I think Mark could win the league this year. Yep. I think that's definitely possible. So I think it's kind of crazy the way our rankings are lining up. I didn't really create tiers, but for me, this is an easy one where, Mark 11, I had Jack at 12. Both of those guys I think could easily win.
Yeah. While you were talking to, I pulled it up. I think Mark actually, now that I said that about Raymond a second ago, Mark is by far the most divisive. None of us have him the same way. You have him, you said where, Kyle? 11?
11.
Where was he for you, Griff? He's 10?
Yep, 10.
Yeah, for me, he's 8. For Zach, he is 13.
Wow.
So Mark burned down Zach's house. And then for Raymond, he is 7. So Raymond is the relative high guy on Mark. Raymond says, Mark, 7. Strong staff and think Abrams, Ramos, good value. Good support cast around them.
Good.
And then just to add to what Kyle said, like my own opinions on Mark, because I'm a little bit higher than each of you, but not by a ton. Mark has a ton of slightly good values when you do like the values thing I did. So just these guys are all, I'm not going to say they're exact, it's going to be too many numbers to say, but just everybody I'm about to name, according to those projection systems, is at least $5 of surplus value. So Christian Walker, CJ Abrams, Spencer Steer, Quan, Ramos, Burns, Gray, Ryan, Sanchez. And I'm not including either closer because the only fault I had doing my thing here is I did it once with saves as a category and then once with saves plus holds. Fangraphs auction calculator does not let you do saves weighted twice as heavily as holds. So I sort of tried to just mentally average them out. For what it's worth, I think they're probably both at or a little bit of discounted value, but they're not even included in that. And he has all those other ones already. So I don't think any of them are as good as some of the guys, like, for example, like we just talked about Raymond, Ohtani. Like none of them have as much value as Ohtani does, I don't think. But he has a lot of surplus value across his roster, just not quite as significant amounts of it at all.
Yep.
Which I think in some ways is kind of good because your risk is a lot lower if a couple of them go down. So and he still has $132 at the auction. He's right in the middle, 119 max bid.
Yeah, I just have 2 things to add on him. He's like the first team where you don't have one low end, at least outlier. Like I feel like every other team had some questionable like post 250, post 300 guys. But this is the first team where like every single player he keeps is like a top 200, like solid. You can count on him to contribute this year. And I just side note, it's funny, like he's kept Kyle Schwarber for the past 2 years, and probably worth it. But yep. I was trying to trade him Jake McCarthy 2 years ago for Kyle Schwarber, and I was like, why isn't he taking it? Like Kyle Schwarber's not keepable. So that might be why this was the first time Mark and I have ever traded.
Schwarber is $2 of surplus value this year, according to the system. Hey, and with that notes for Mark too, I think Kyle liked his pitching staff is kind of sneaky. Just projecting him to have replacement, like the 40th starter and the 40th whatever spot for his remaining roster spots. I don't know how I'll draft. It's hard to do that. But based on what everybody has right now and then just giving everybody replacement level guys, I have him as a top 5 or so whip and ERA team in both. I think he's going to have a good amount of runs. There's a lot of leadoff hitters. Like Schwarber has some power too. He's not hitting leadoff this year, but he projects to have a lot of runs. And I actually think he's pretty good in steals and RBI too. I think, though, if I'm Mark, and I agree with this, it was borne out in the production thing. He's, because of guys like Schwarber, not going to have a great batting average. I know he has Quan, but this seems like a decent spot to get Luis Arias if he goes for not a ton of his value. So, Mark, do with that what you will. But if I owned your team, I might be targeting a Luis Arias type.
Yeah, that's a good call. I mean, Christian Walker, given how much power he has, he's usually pretty decent.
Oh, yeah.
Average. And then I think in Houston, things could turn out really well for him. But yeah, CJ Abrams at shortstop, I think an area where a lot of times you hope to get speed and some average. I think he has such a wide range of outcomes this year. Like he's a great player to keep, but CJ Abrams, like he might not hit for average at all.
My color is changing. Am I getting like yellow on your guys' screen?
I'm not.
Okay, never mind. Maybe it's just the lighting in my room. Sorry, I didn't mean to make that face about Abrams. I like Abrams. It just suddenly I got really yellow on my own screen, but maybe it's just my lighting.
You look good.
Thanks.
But no, I mean, C.J. Abrams, he was sent down at one point. I mean, it was disciplinary, but
Yeah.
But I mean, 2 years ago, I don't remember how good he was, but I feel like we were thinking of him as like a top 25, top 20 keeper in our league. Like, so I agree. Huge range outcomes on him.
All right, Griff, who's next?
So number 9, I have Mark Misigman.
I have Miz at 10. And the big note that I wrote notes for each one. I wrote down Rooker.
Nice. That's like writing schemes before.
Exactly. Rooker.
You said
I think Rooker is probably one of the best surplus values
he is
in the league.
He's in the top 12, I think.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because like I didn't even like Zach for cutting him when he did last year. I didn't immediately put a claim in, or if I did, I didn't put any money on it because I think Mark got him for like $10 or something like that. Anyway, I have Misigman 7, so I'm the high guy on Miz here of the three of us. Let me see where Zach and Raymond had him. He is on Raymond's list 11 with the note 11, Miz. Love value on Rooker, and Freed is a stud. Dominguez taking next step will really help. That's helpful. And then Zach has him 12th. So we are actually all higher than they are. And I am of the five of us, the highest on you, Mark Misigman. So I will take my thank you note. You can hate the other guys. What do you got on him, though, Griff?
I think this is a more variance team than other Mark Minnis's. Like Minnis, you look and it's like all very solid. But on here you see a lot of question marks. Like Luis Garcia, if he can continue what he did last year, didn't he go like 2020? Xavier Edwards had like a huge average. Jason Dominguez is huge prospect. Michael King looked like an ace, down the stretch. It's like Max Fried, ace before arm issues. It's like there's a lot of upside. But even Rooker, like as your stability, like he's never hit 290 before, right? Like that was kind of
and he doesn't
out of
protect
nowhere.
Just because they do so much historical stuff in it too. He's projected as like a 260, 265 guy, I think.
So yeah, a lot of upside. I mean, I could see him out of everyone in here. He's one of the more high upside.
Yeah, he's got 13 spots to fill in with $187. So you can average like 12 to $15 a spot, and that's. I mean, you're probably gonna want your last couple guys to be one or two other guys. So you can buy a couple legitimate difference makers too. And then at surplus value of more than $5, you got Diaz, Garcia, Griffin just named, Edwards, Dominguez, Green, Rooker, and King. With Rooker being by far the biggest surplus at like almost $35. I like his spot a lot. I think Mark is in a pretty good spot, and he's going to have a lot of money to target a few significant areas. I think his pitching is okay, maybe a little bit above average, and he can draft one or two more, and I probably like it as at least a league average one. I think his offense, again, I think is also probably close to – again, I have him 7, so I think he's right in the middle. But he's one of the middle tier guys I feel the best about, which is why I have him as high as I do. Like we've said a lot already, this is a pretty big tier in the middle. And he is one of my favorite, not quite my favorite, but one of my favorite middle ones. Anything else on him from either of you?
I really like Miz's team too. Even though it sounds like I'm the low man on him, I think Miz has made some really good trades over the past year overall. I think he's built his team out really nicely. I like that he bought Riley Green, made a trade to get him. I remember a story from Miz that someone in his circle coached Riley Green. So I feel like that's really good mojo to get him on the squad.
Yeah.
I know Miz also, he was trying to, we're talking a little bit about Judge because Miz is, of course, a big Yankees fan. And I think he made a really good offer to me, and I countered. It wasn't quite good enough. I countered, and I hope it wasn't an insulting counter. So, sorry, Miz. He was not interested.
What was the offer?
I wanted to get Rooker in a trade back for Judge. Hopefully I'm not spilling the beans too much, but the offer originally was Jason Dominguez and Luis Garcia. And I said it wasn't quite enough for me.
Yeah,
That's fair.
And then I turned it back and wanted Rooker and Jason Dominguez. And I was willing to do that, but he said no.
How do you feel about it, Griffin? You done it?
No, I wouldn't have moved to Rooker. I think Rooker's a nice, steady, solid piece.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have either. But I don't think it's like insulting.
Okay, good.
I don't think it has to like ruin communication moving forward. I think it'll be okay.
All right.
All right. So
I'm
who's
glad.
next?
All right, so number 8, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. Number 8, I have Charlie.
And you had Ms. 9, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Charlie for me is 10.
I had Charlie 13.
Okay, we got a big skew here. And then we've got him with Zach. He is 7. Zach is the high guy on Charlie so far. And Raymond had him 13. So Raymond's right with you, Kyle. Raymond says, Brown Bombers, 13. Has some great players at good deals, but lacks exciting players outside of PCA and Merrill. Should probably have Bombers way higher given track record as a savvy owner. Why is he where he is for you there, Griff? You start?
So, like you were saying, solid team. I feel like out of everyone in this team, maybe you could argue he's most likely to finish 7th. Like, there's just a lot of solid guys. Like, there's not much downside risk. Like Zach Eflin, Logan Webb, just kind of boring, set it and forget it. SPs. Although, I don't know. PCA and Jackson Merrill, that is a lot of upside.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice, solid team. Could go a lot of ways.
Yeah. Again, even though I have him 10, I think he's definitely in the group where I feel like I wouldn't be shocked if Charlie finishes 1, 2, or 3. Good draft, especially. He's another one where he's not quite as high as some of the other teams we've already talked about, but 13 spots to fill, so half his roster with $169. He's going to be able to get at least 1 or 2, maybe even 3 legitimate difference makers, maybe even 4 if he gets like a bunch of $30 guys. Which I feel like is probably more Charlie's speed. Charlie's not going to probably spend $60 or $70 on one player. He'll probably get a bunch of like 35 guys. But if you add Alex Bregmans or Machados or Yelich's and fill out your roster that way, it'll probably be pretty good to look at. I think he probably should be focusing on average OPS and homers most. I like him as average-ish or slightly above in the other offensive categories. And then in pitching, it's hard just because he's only keeping a handful of pitchers. Webb's a pretty good surplus value still, though. I pointed out. I was a little bit surprised how much I liked Webb the more I looked at it. I thought he was like keepable for sure, but not like special. And now I think he probably has another year or 2. What about you, Kyle?
I think Griffin said it well earlier with Ray, with the compliment sandwich. I think similar point here on Charlie. I think Charlie is someone who's consistently competitive, and I feel like he kind of fits into the Ariel Cohen like value and if not move on mentality. Like he likes a lot of those middling players that give you those like $2, $3, $4 surplus values. And I think to Charlie's credit, he has a really good player in Jackson Merrill, who I think is a star. And for $13, that's a player that you can build around. So the bad part, I think, comes from the fact that I don't think his typical strategy, it seems like he's not following it as closely this year, in my opinion. I think there are a number of players that are not really presenting the same surplus value that you'd want. Like, I think Freddie Peralta is a good example. I think he's decently well above what I would want to pay for Freddie Peralta. And I think if you want to go forward with this strategy, I think it's really tough to lose on negative surplus. Now, this goes back to Griffin's point earlier. If you feel confidently about Freddie Peralta, then you shouldn't hesitate to go out and make that move. It just has seemed to me like that has not typically been Charlie's way. He usually likes to find just a little surplus value here and there and piece his team together that way, and it usually works really well. He usually has a great team. But I guess that's kind of my point. Like, even someone like O'Neill, who, I love Tyler O'Neill. Like, I don't know if $16 is necessarily great surplus value for him. So that's kind of where I landed on Charlie. I think guys like, Pete Crow Armstrong, I agree there is upside. I wouldn't put him in the same category as Merrill. I don't think he is even that exciting, actually. So that's kind of where I landed. I think Merrill is fantastic, one of the best keepers in the entire league. But beyond that, it's hard for me to get excited.
Yeah, Merrill is great find on that Charlie last year. You got an absolute stud for a handful of years at least now. Do you guys think PCA or someone else is the second best keeper on his team as far as surplus value goes?
The second best is probably like $6 or $7 surplus on Eflin or Webb, honestly. I don't think he has better than... Who is it? You think Naylor?
I was going to say Iglesias, but I think you're right. It's got to be Naylor.
Naylor.
Yeah.
Naylor is pretty like my projection systems. He's been pretty consistent for a couple of years. I think that probably helps a lot.
Like $10 of surplus?
Naylor is worth 28, it says, across both those things average. So there's a good bit of value there.
28's juicy. Yeah. 28's juicy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, other ones that are all $5 or more: Alec Boehm, Naylor, Bellinger slightly. He's right on $5. Pete Crow Armstrong, Merrill's huge, and then Webb.
Maybe I'm wrong then. Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think to be fair, I think everybody you named is guys I think he's overpaying for. Charlie's another one. I don't remember I said it about. Was it? It might have been Brad. I don't remember who I said about it earlier. Sorry, I don't remember. But if you made theoretically quote unquote, again, it's not even my own opinions. It's just what those two calculators say. Only optimal keeps, and don't keep a guy like a Freddie Peralta or some of these other guys Kyle mentioned. Charlie actually is like right in the middle of the pack. And even with those guys in there factored in, he's actually higher than 10. He's at 9, but I think he's 10. I think I already read Raymond's thing for him, right? Do we have any other thoughts on Charlie? As much as you probably hate us, Charlie, remember, Zach had you even lower, so we're not your enemy. I know you and Kyle are like big fantasy rivals, but maybe your rival Zach now, Charlie. Who'd you have next, Griff?
Number 7, I have Kyle.
Wow, okay. Where'd you have you, Kyle?
I had myself at 6.
I also have Kyle 6. Let me see where Zach and Raymond were. Raymond has you at 4, so Raymond loves you. And then Zach has you... One, two, three, four, 5. So Zach and Raymond actually are the high guys on you, but there's a pretty small amount of skew here, though. So Griffin, since you hate Kyle the most, tell us why.
Negative skew.
Yeah.
Well, it's just hard because it's the offense is so barren with spots filled.
Yeah.
But there's 3 big boppers on there. Like you have the best hitter in baseball. Or second best, probably best pure hitter.
He's the one, yeah.
Ozuna's, last year was amazing, and Jake Berger moving to Texas, you should be expecting big power again. And then pitching, Chris Sale, a lot of risk, but also a lot of upside. And I think the risks are overstated with him. Tyler Glasnow, same thing, but probably more risky and probably deserved. Hunter Brown, who I hate you for picking up, and is like 5.5 ERA, and then just whooping us with him. And the good relief core. It's hard to see what it's going to be filled out at this point, but I have no doubt, during the draft, you'll fill out.
Kyle's a pretty funny one, dude, because like you just said, Kyle's pitching staff is almost done. But Kyle's offense, I don't know what it's going to look like whatsoever. I have no idea what Kyle's going to draft or, what he's going to do. Notable surplus values, Ozuna, huge, one of the top 20 in the league. Berger's a lot of value. Hunter Brown, Glasnow, Grayson is slightly of value. Again, not my opinion, just the projections. I want to make sure I keep saying it. So everybody's not like, oh, you hate my player. This is just, I'm purely saying what auction calculator says. Sale, and then Mason Miller. And Mason Miller, I actually made a hyphen though, because again, I think I mentioned there's no real good way to factor in exactly how our scoring will impact this. So even with, I'm thinking they're a little bit underrated overall, it still likes Mason Miller more than most other closers. So
I'll have, if I can add one more thing, I didn't with my ranking of you at 7. Like it doesn't factor in how I think you'll fill out. But that I mean, I've disagreed with how other people have said how you won last year. Like I feel like you did a good job of filling out last year with Willie Adames, Bryce Strang. I've talked about. So I didn't factor that in having you 7. I didn't factor in the Kyle factor.
Thanks.
Yeah. Having you 6, I didn't do much of it. I think when I did like raw surplus value over like just roster spot stuff, you're a little bit lower than that. But I think tiebreaker you to the top of this tier that you're in just because I trust you the most, which I don't know if it's fair or not, but it's also kind of a benefit you get when you just won. Let me see what Raymond said about you real quick before you can talk about you. Raymond said, because he's your biggest fan. Don't forget that. Raymond Zink loves you. Kyle, 4. This rank might be because he is reigning champion. Not a lot of young bats, aside from Bazana, but he has a lot of star players locked in. Might have to rebrand from Green Goblin, considering he kept a lot of pitchers, !
Yeah,
Maybe
that's
you could
true.
Hitter Goblin or something, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going in with a little bit of a different strategy this year. I think it's interesting to try to get a lot of the pitching stats earlier in the year and try to attack the timing difference between hitting and pitching that seems to happen every year when it's cold out. Pitchers overperform. I don't know if it's going to work out, but we'll see. I don't know. So
early on last year, though, and I remember talking lively about it with you on one of our early pods because I sort of have the opposite general philosophy. And I want to see who's sort of actually making like expected changes to their arsenal, like how they're actually performing. But you're right. I mean, it's colder. Hitters are usually behind pitchers. I'm coming around now to where I'm sort of more. I don't know if I'm exactly agreeing with you, but also maybe I'm just biased because you did it last year and it worked out really well. It is funny though. I mean, Raymond's got a good point. You went from like no pitching. You're like Griffin 4 or 5 years ago, where it was no pitchers to now it's like all pitchers.
Yeah, I think it's fun to try the extremes in any strategy. I think that's kind of like the most fun way to do it. And then also for me, I want to have certainty on the pitching going into it. That way I can have a handful of targets on the hitting side that are probably going to go for outrageous, amounts of our salary. And I either get them or I don't. And then I can have my, backup plans either way. So that's kind of the plan going into it. I basically don't have a hitting team right now. Like I just have 3 players.
Yeah.
So I get it. That's why I ranked myself pretty middle of the pack too. I'm not going to be surprised if I walk away from the draft with like 3 or 4 $1 players. And
I was going to ask you about your sort of strategy going into it because you have 15 spots to fill, which is on the higher side. You're in the middle of the money, but you're not in the higher side of the money. You're right in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, I'm almost definitely going to fill out my pitching with $1 players. That's almost a guarantee. So I wasn't even counting the pitching side.
Yeah.
I mean, like maybe 3 or 4 hitting $1 players. But I don't know. The more I've looked at it, the more I'm just comfortable with going kind of this stars and scrubs kind of feel. So we'll see how it turns out. It's different. It might fail.
I think for somebody who's been pretty proactive and had a lot of success both identifying and getting the guys early, a pumps and chump strategy. Either they pump or you chump them and get someone who's going to actually be good for you. You're probably better than the average person, I think, at doing that.
Well, and I think someone like Brendan or someone like Ray is a really good example why it's a good strategy even if it fails. Because this is a keeper league, you have more consolidated chips to sell. So if you go stars and scrubs and you don't think you're a winner, you can easily pull the cord, sell off Judge, sell off whoever. Hopefully I get someone big in the draft. And that way, it's not like you have a bunch of other keepers that you care about. You can cut no-namers that you don't care about. It's just a more nimble way of managing your team. So
in some ways, with like even just long-term thinking too, it's helpful to have a couple spots for guys who could be huge surplus value if the $1 draft pick pans out. Like you get a Frank or a Mason Wynn or like an $8 Willie Adames last year in the draft, and those could end up being pretty good keeper players too that you can trade for other stuff.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, so we'll see.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is like a good spot to try to do a dirty rebuild where you can either compete or you can quickly decide like you want to rebuild and have flexibility to do both.
That was kind of my plan. Yeah, retool.
And just really quickly again, where did we all have him? I think Raymond was the highest. Was Zach the lowest?
7.
I have him 6. You had him 6. Kyle, you had yourself 6. Pardon me.
6, yeah.
And then Zach had you 5. So
Wow.
both Raymond and Zach like you the most. You and I, and then Griffin hates you. I like you and Griffin being enemies again, and this is fun.
Bastard.
Who's next, Griff?
So that completes my 3rd tier. So from Kyle to Brad, that was all 1 tier for me.
Okay.
So now we go into my 2nd tier, where I have Roman at number 6.
Okay. This is one of our bigger disagreement ones. I have Roman down. No one heard it earlier because we peeped it out, but I have Roman 11.
I have Roman 7.
Nice. So we're going to have some fun debate here. I'm the low guy on Roman. Let's see what Zach and Raymond said. Zach had him 6. So he's right with you guys. What did Raymond say? Raymond had him 10, so Raymond's closer to me. But I am the one Raymond should hate. Sorry, Raymond. Why am I wrong, Griff?
So maybe this is me underrating draft budget. But him just having 4 like really solid hitters, like really top end with Harper, Devers, O'Neal Cruz is being drafted like that, and Fernando Tatis. It's just that the core 4 hitting group is like the first one where it's like, you can really see them carrying it with being able to fill in around it. He'll need to fill in around it. But at least, he has Alec Burleson, Vinny, and I don't really love the keep of Edmund Carter, but he does have a little bit around it. And then solid pitching staff.
Kyle, you're more with Griffin. Why don't you go before I talk?
Yeah, I think Roman, I have him 7. I think a couple of reasons that we could be wrong, I think it's kind of what Griffin said. When you see a team that's fully laid out in front of you, it's easier to take a bite on it. I do think he kept too many people. Like I think Harper and I think Devers are both negative surplus values. I think that when you make a leap for a player like that, it's not necessarily a bad thing, especially in a league where discounted value does exist. So you have to spend above whatever the par value is from time to time. It's kind of that game we've talked about in the past. Do you think they'll go for more than that or less than that in the draft? But you can't play that game too many times, right? Especially if they're really high valued players like Harper and Devers are. So that's a tough situation. But the good side of that is that he has Harper and Devers. So he does have a lot of really high level talent, like Griffin said. I think his pitching could be underrated. I'll go out on a limb and say I do think he's keeping a lot of pitchers. I would not do the same if I had his situation. But I'm ranking him, middle of the pack. I think he has a good team. I think, he's got like $38 to spend. I wrote it down. Yeah, $39 to spend. And he has a solid team. So he could go out and get a really nice piece for $30.
Yeah, and the other side of what Kyle just said too, it's probably in some ways easier to like a team that is more filled out, but it's also, maybe I'm guilty having him lower, sort of the mystery box thing where it's like these other teams could be anything. They could even be what Roman paid for.
Yeah.
And maybe I should have just taken Roman. I will say I wanted to wait till we'd gone over all 3 of the teams I had. My hardest 3 to rank in the entire thing was between 9, 10, 11, Raymond, Charlie, and Roman. I thought they were the 3 hardest, most interchangeable almost. And I ultimately went with Roman as the 3rd amongst them, but I think they're all basically 1A, 1B, 1C. So maybe I'm even artificially making it sound like I'm lower than I am. I think, more worried than probably either of you are, that you both mentioned the roster spot stuff. I'm great with having some $1 players, but 11 roster spots to fill with $39. I mean, if you get any more than like 1 or 2 guys at like $10, you're getting almost all $1 players. So I think it's hard there. Obviously, your star power is great. I mean, and before I say anything else, too, let me just quickly tell you more than $5 of surplus value, guys. Tatis is a huge surplus. O'Neal Cruz is still even as he gets a little bit pricier at 28, he's still more than $5 of surplus. Pasquantino's more than $5. Tanner Bybee, Imanaga, Lugo, Bryson, or not Bryson, Wu though too is. And I have noted on here, I actually have him as top 6 in all the offensive categories but I was just doing loose I ranks everybody and assuming just replacement players for everybody who doesn't have a player in a spot somewhere. I have him in the top half and comfortably top half of most of them. I just don't think he's any better than like 8th or 9th, even with those pitchers I named that I like and the pitching ones, and probably partially because he has some guys I don't like that much. And then again, just wrestling really hard with him, Charlie, and Raymond, who are all 3 really different builds and 3 really different styles, was hard for me. So I could see Roman really easily. Maybe even as we're talking through it, I could put him as high as 9, but I'm going to keep him 11 for now, and that's sort of where I am on him. And Kyle, your point too, sorry, one other thing too. I don't necessarily dislike either. I think you said it really well, dude, about like Bryce and Devers and stuff. I think they're both, according to, again, my average thing of ATC and the Bad X, slightly overpays, even with inflation factored in, but not in a significant way. Neither one's, I think, more than $4 or $5 of overpay. I don't know if I would have kept both personally, just because even though I want to have a stars and scrubs approach, I think 11 spots to fill with $39 is really hard to do without getting mostly scrubs.
No, I'll deviate a little. I would have Harper and Devers as like no doubt keepers.
Really?
Like I in my head, I think they would go for at least $15 to $20 more than that in the draft.
I think definitely probably would. Devers might. I'm not even saying you're wrong. I'm just saying Kyle made the point, and I think it's pretty good about at the top end you'll overpay a little bit. We know that's going to be the case. It's just doing it more than once or twice makes it hard to. You have to do it knowing you'll get value elsewhere, and a lot of his mid-tier guys he's keeping, I don't think are surplus. That's all.
Yeah, if it were me, I wouldn't have kept Carter, Cade Smith, or Yuri Perez and taken that extra $23 to fill out.
I think,
and then really kept those stars.
But yeah, he's only 6, right? Cade Smith 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one that's probably closest for me. I think otherwise I agree with you. And honestly, I probably would have maybe had him 9 there, just because then I would have felt way better replacing whatever that'd be 13 spots with $60 than I would 39 for 11. Raymond talking about Roman. Roman 10 has star power in Harper, Devers, Tatis, surplus value, but no value eye popping. Strong core. Not sure if we'll have draft budget or very much of it, but probably won't need it.
Nice.
Now I wonder if I were Roman, I might just almost punt steals. Like I feel like if he punted steals, you could finish in the money. The offensive powerhouses you can try to look after are more likely to be kept. And like, I don't know.
The problem with punting steals up for his build is O'Neal, Cruz, and Tatis are already pretty above average at that. So you're already at worst probably like bottom 5 in steals. Like you probably want to trade at least one of them.
Well, with all the talk in Boston about Bregman taking over third potentially and kind of trying to figure out what's going on, Devers is DH. Devers is saying he's going to start running because he's like he's tired of just the rigmarole. So
but Roman's going to let him know we're punting steals though.
So if Devers can do like 30-30, yeah, like I don't know.
And maybe Harper doesn't take.
Wait, what's that?
Harper doesn't run some. I mean,
yeah.
I think his team is good. I don't think it's a bad team. And he's not as strong as I said about some of these other ones. Like Jack was my slam dunk. He's finishing above where I ranked him. Roman probably is better than 11th when it's all said and done. He's pretty active throughout the year. I don't think he lets himself fall that low if he completely rebuilds. But I just don't love the situation going into the draft very much.
Yeah, you get 25 steals from Tatis. You get, maybe 20 plus from Carter if he can turn it around. Then, 30 from Devers. 25 from Harper. That's a good year. What?
He projects as, I think, 8th or 9th in steals. And he's actually one of the easiest ones to do that with because I sort of know what he'll have, as opposed to like when I project Kyle with replacement players, it makes no sense almost just because I don't know what the fuck Kyle's going to do on offense. He only has like 3 hitters. Roman, I sort of know what it's going to look like.
I only draft pitchers.
That's true.
I have to real quick. I have to add this every year that I rank Roman. I have to make a reminder that this is only based on his team. He would be much lower if I factored him as a fantasy player.
Gee.
There you go.
I said that last year.
I think Griffin said that because even though I ranked the lowest, I feel like you probably like me more than Griffin right now. Let's move on.
So that's why you recruited Roman. That's why you brought him in, just hoping it would be easier to make money. Just take his money.
Yeah, exactly. I love Roman. All right, so number 5, same tier, second tier. I have Eric.
What about you, Kyle?
I have Eric 2.
Nice. I thought I was being fun here. I have Eric at 5. Let's look at real quick while one of you can start going. On Raymond, he is 8, so Raymond hates Eric. And Zach has him 3, so I thought I was being kind of aggressive, but I'm probably on the negative side of this now, having him at 5. What you got, Griff?
Well, I want to give it to Kyle. I want to hear.
Okay, yeah, Kyle, that's fine. As the high guy, why do you like him as much as you do? Because you are the high man.
Yeah, so like just to understate it, a few things that sometimes I'm not a big fan of. Like I think having Sasaki at his cost is incredible. Eric's done a really good job over the past couple of years picking up players from overseas who, there's uncertainty around, and it's a smart, options contract. You get them, maybe you have the value later on, maybe you don't, but you get to cut them if you don't. So really smart process, and there you go, Eric. You get Sasaki. I think a player like Sasaki specifically this year might not actually give you the value that a lot of us are kind of assuming from a projection standpoint and from a ranking standpoint. So that's, I think, just one little negative. If you throw that out the window, still, Eric has a phenomenal team. He has $170 to spend. He has 6 top 100 players and probably the best starting pitchers overall, even with the Sasaki note. So I'll throw that out the window. He probably has my favorite pitching group of the entire league. He can't overspend on closers moving forward. I think that put him in a tough situation, but I think he has one of the best chances overall to win the league, just given the setup today. He has enough money to add multiple core pieces in the draft that are top 75 players. And I think if he does it the right way and doesn't go out and spend, $30 on a closer and, just not really attacking where he'll add categorical dominance, value, then I think Eric has a really good shot. So I like his team a lot.
Just before we move off of it, and we'll talk to you, Griff, I don't think Eric has closers there, right? Why are you pointing out the closers? You just don't think he's just found that in general? What do you mean when you say that? I just don't know if I understand.
I'm saying that Eric will have a tough time getting closers in the draft. So I'm saying going into the draft, there's uncertainty, right? You don't know who he's going to pick.
Gotcha.
So I'm just trying to say I hope he doesn't overspend. Because a lot of times I think in fantasy, when you have a position of need, I don't think Eric will do this, but I think a lot of players kind of hyper focus on that area of need, and just they go in with a mission. Well, this is my area of need. I need to go get a closer. And then they spend too much on that. If Eric just continues what he's doing, I think he's done a really good job. I think he's going to have one of the best situations going into the year. All I was saying was he shouldn't overspend when he tackles that position of need.
Okay, good. Sorry to make you say it again. I just didn't fully understand what you're saying. I agree with you entirely. What about you, Griff?
Well, it kind of hurts to go over this team because of how many guys used to be on my team. It's like, I say this every time, but it's like looking at X's. But I mean, like Kyle said, just great pitching staff. Number 1 pitcher, either him or Skeens with Scooble, and just real nice, solid offense. You have like just so many top 50-ish players in Jazz, James Wood, Seager, and Marte. So yeah, I mean, he's right there. If things break right, easily see him. He has a chance to win.
Yeah, and Kyle, you didn't do the exact projections thing I did, where it's just linearly like how much extra value is over. Eric's actually 4th in that, a spot lower than I have him. Or I have him a spot lower than he would be in that. Like you said, $170 to fill 14 spots. You can do a lot to add to already a really good core. Huge surplus values with Marte, huge with Jazz, huge with Wood, huge with Scooble. And I have all the ones that are $5 or more listed, but all of them are more than $15 almost. They all are more than $15 so far. And then Yamamoto, more than $15. Roki is exactly $15. And I think projection systems are kind of conservative with them even. I don't think he's going to be amazing this year, but I think he'll be good. Eric is my second favorite pitching staff. Kyle said he was his favorite. It's pretty crazy. I mean, he's also either right at average or above average, just off the projections he has with his players so far on offense too, plus one of the best pitching staffs. And his offense probably will not just get replacement level guys. So I think it's very possible he'll be someone assuming he has a draft or doesn't overpay, like Kyle's saying. I wouldn't want to overpay anywhere ideally, but definitely don't like panic over everything you don't have a ton of. I think saves also, if I was going to punt something, that's one I'm fine punting because there will definitely be a team that has 6 closers that is trading one in July. There will definitely be teams out of it that trade closers. There definitely will be closers who get their jobs in May. I wouldn't overpay there either. But I feel pretty confident that Eric's going to be in the money. And as we're talking through it, I wrestle with him and really a couple of my other ones right around him. He's in my tier of guys I priced to win it though. Like I think he's going to finish in the money, even though I only have him 5. Let me see what AR Raymond said, because Raymond was the lowest, I think, of those guys I just named. Zach has him 3, so Zach likes him as much as everybody here, closer to Kyle even. Let's sober you up though, Eric, and you can talk to Raymond if you hate this. Eckstein, 8. Wood, Scooble, Jazz, Roki, Yamamoto, tremendous value. If auction go his way, could make waves.
Very nice. It's like a haiku.
It kind of is. I feel like Raymond's quick. Some of them are really informative. That one, I don't know if it says anything, but yeah. We like your team a lot, Eric. I think Eric, if I looked at my ones last year, is probably, I think I had him in like the slightly below average middle last year. I think he's one of my biggest risers.
I think it's because he's put a lot of effort into building his team the right way. Like this is just what it looks like to do good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And I will amend a point I made last pod too before we move off of him. I still wouldn't have made the Michael King trade, but I don't think I realized when I was evaluating it just how much I love his pitching staff already perfectly. It's a huge position of strength. I still think he probably isn't the side I want in that trade, but I understand more why you want Paredes and Young.
Yep.
And I think going back to with Raymond, like just being willing to make the moves you think are right is important. Like that's how you wind up with such a good team is you make bold moves that, you might not win, quote unquote, but you have a vision and you go with it.
You got to go for it. He could be Eric could very easily be the success. I think I had Kyle 5th last year, so it's a super easy success story to see a guy who took over a team a couple years ago come in and win again maybe now. Good job, Eric. All right, we're getting to the top of this now, Griff. Who's your 4?
All right, so 4th team. This starts my tier 1. I have Zach number 4.
Where you got Zach, Kyle?
I have Zach 5.
Okay. I have Zach 4. I had a really tough time with him and Eric. Not quite as hard as the threesome I named earlier in the 9 to 11 range, but let's see. Zach has himself as 2, and Raymond has him also 2. So Zach and Raymond love Zach. We hate Zach. Let's see. I'll give you Raymond really quick to hype us up on Zach, and then Griffin can talk. Zach, 2. Core of Ellie, Witt, Harris, Kirby, awesome. Plenty of draft budget, 2. Strong track record of being savvy as an owner. He is my 2.
I love that.
Me too. I actually really love that Raymond wrote the quips. I love that Zach and Raymond did this, and I love that Raymond made real notes too. It's excellent.
So,
what do you think?
I mean, I think anytime you have 3 first rounders, it's like you're there,
Yep.
And solid pitching staff. Gallen, Kirby as a 1-2, is totally fine to enter the draft with.
Sure.
And if you look, it feels like he's heavy steals, and he was last year too, and he just filled out with nothing but power. So I think he'll do the same again with, I think, Wallner, Stanton, or who he had last year. Maybe he gets a Tolia. He's just going to probably fill out with a ton of power.
Yeah. I think Zach's probably the best candidate. We named a few sort of junior glob candidates. If I'm Zach, I'd really embrace that this year. And I would probably buy a couple big power bats just because his pitching staff concerns me a little bit. But if you're going to try to spike some good outcomes where you win the league, I think you kind of want to play on the margin. I'd rather just take margin risk with pitcher than offense. And your offense is already pretty good. Adding some power can make you like top 3 or so in almost every offensive stat. A thing with Zach that was interesting, though, is Zach is the player or the owner who even though I rank him ahead of Eric, and I think it's mostly just because of those ridiculous top couple, he actually has less keeper value overall. We just do the hard values than Eric. Ellie is a smash, huge value. Witt is a huge value. Witt is $30. Witt's worth $70. So like even when the player gets at $30, like it's like Ohtani light almost. Like wow, I still have probably 3-4 years of this guy being super useful still. Harris has still got more than $15 keeper value. Kirby is $20 of value. Gallen is like a buck, but I think projection systems like Kyle said with Burns, Gallen's in the same kind of style pitcher. I think they slightly underrate him. I'd probably put him personally a little bit higher. But I say all those, and then Zach of the teams in the top half has the least other ones where they're not my opinions, but there's no one else on his team, the ones I just named, who are more than $5 of surplus value, just based on projections. And kind of like Roman, 16 spots for 103 is not anywhere near as daunting, I think, as what Roman's doing. But Zach probably should, if it was me and I was Zach, I'd probably just make as much value, I guess. But I would probably personally, like I said, focus on getting a couple really big power bats and maybe one more pitcher and then doing glob light. Or if I wanted to do pitching, I would do all pitching and just try to glob some like Toglia type power bats and maybe make a trade. Because those are probably the two areas that can get you back to like 1 or 2 in this league, I think. What do you think, Kyle? You had him also 4?
I had him 5. I think you guys said it. Yeah, don't want to be too redundant. He rounds out my top 5. I think he is kind of like Roman on steroids. I think you're right there. He's got 3 first-rounders. There's not a whole lot you can ask for. I think if he globs his way to a really good pitching rotation, which already he has some great pieces, but if he can execute a glob, I think he's real, 50-50 chance to win the league. I mean, I think pitching is just an uncertainty for him right now, just because he doesn't have all the pieces, but he could easily do that.
I mentioned it with Eric, sort of getting his trade more for King, even though I didn't like it at the time as much. I get why Zach is traded for Soto. I don't think it changed the way I evaluated it then. If Soto's like probably the best hitter out there, him or Ramirez, you think, and you want to get him, I think it makes sense to get him. I would like him slightly more if he didn't have Soto, I will say.
Interesting. I think the trade seemed aggressive to me too, but I think it's unlikely that he would go for less than 84 in the draft. So it seems like that's kind of a way to just lock in your pick.
Maybe that's sort of where I'm slightly lower than. I think Soto probably would have gone for less than 84 personally.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think a lot less though. To be clear, I'm not saying any kind of strong foot in the dirt kind of take there.
And you might be right.
We'll see.
I take the over too.
Yeah, and I'm not saying with much confidence. I just would probably take him there or slightly under there. I'd probably put him in like the high 70s. But it's fine. Again, also, you're going to never pay at the top end. It's going to always happen. And Zach got, maybe that's his favorite, one of the guys who would have been out there. Maybe like some more, maybe he's not into Ramirez this year. You want power. Soto's not necessarily a 40 home run guy, but he's probably better for power, or at least right on par with Ramirez. Zach does not need speed either. So Soto is a great guy for his build.
Unless he starts running.
Unless he decides now he's a base stealer. He signed his contract. He can take a risk with his body now. But yeah, we all love Zach's team, I think. It's pretty clear.
Yeah.
And Zach and Raymond mostly love Zach. So the fans love you, Zach. We are not quite as much in love with you, but we do like you a lot. That was your 4, right, Griff? You were having 4 too? All right, so we're in the top 3.
One last thing. I think I was saying Skeens could be your top keeper. I feel like Ellie's right there. Yeah. That's interesting, but.
Ellie is 16 and projects with the 2 systems. I have him at 55 between the 2. So that is $39 of value. That's pretty good.
All right. So my number 3, I have you, Nick.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Kyle?
I also have you 3.
I also have me 3. Let's see what Raymond and Zach said. Zach has me 1 and Raymond has me 1.
Wow.
So the 2 of them are big Zach fans and big Nick fans. Nice. I think I need new podcast hosts, Zach and Raymond. If you guys want to get on the pod with me, I'm kind of done with these 2. Let me read you Raymond's quip, and then you guys can start talking about why you hate me. So, number 1, Nick B. Boo. Fantastic group of core players. Star power, highlights by Vlad, Acuna, Strider, and plethora of high upside talent. For what it's worth, I said I have me 3. We all 3 have me 3. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, you have a really great core, right? Strider, Acuna, Royce, Sandy. Those are, I think, the 4 that will kind of determine your season, because those are the high volatility. I don't want to say injury, but Sandy's out there hitting 100. Like, I think he'll be fine. But those are players that I think I like more than consensus. I think in a league like this that has gotten really tight and players making really good decisions in our league, I think you kind of need some of these high volatility guys in order to win. I understand some of the news recently on Acuna hasn't been super favorable, but I think it is a little bit crazy given what Acuna did just a couple years ago, how low some of his rankings have fallen. So part of my personal thought of those rankings does fit into where I put you, Nick, at 3. I do think these guys overall, you might have a dud in the 4, but I think overall those 4 will lead you to, really great quality play, and I think you'll finish in the money likely. You have 8 other outside of those guys. You have 8 other top 100 players, so it's not like you're lacking otherwise. So I think that's a really good team. You have money to spend in the draft too. So I think it's just solid all around. The injury risk is the big thing, and I think it's smart to make a calculated bet on that when you can.
What about you, Griff?
So I agree. You just have solid hitters like top to bottom and solid pitching. It's a good team. I think you have the one catcher who I actually factored in as mattering. Everyone else was kind of like, it's a good catcher, it's a decent catcher. But William Contreras is really the one who you would definitely start regardless of him being a catcher. Just solid team. Royce Lewis, like Kyle was saying, you have tons of upside. So pretty much agree. You just got to stay healthy.
Yeah, I agree with what Kyle said too. I have a ton of injury impacted range of outcome with all the guys you named, and then it's funny, my non-injury guys who I think are probably big parts of my team, like Brenton Doyle. What if he's just Nolan Jones, but this year's Nolan Jones? What if Lawrence Butler is first month Lawrence Butler? Then all of a sudden their range of outcomes I think is also super steep. I hope it's not. I don't think it is, but even my ones who aren't injury reasons, I think I do have a pretty explosive type of way this could go in a lot of ways.
It is interesting. I would say that you kind of have 3 of those type of buzzy players in Lawbutt, Doyle, and Casas.
Yeah.
And what's funny about that is I would definitely say I like Casas and Butler the most of those 3. I feel like Doyle has more of a chance of becoming a Nolan Jones or something like that. But I mean, he's obviously a top 100 player. So it's good to have that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
He's had big strikeout issues in the past. I am a third, both in my own rankings, then also in as far as total surplus value factored in. Contreras, Griffin just made the point. I wasn't on the fence. He was always almost assuredly a guy I was going to keep at 16. I hate keeping catchers. We've talked about that a bunch, me and Kyle have over the last year and a half. But in a one-catcher league, with other catcher keepers included, he's actually, according to the BADX and ATC, worth $34 in a one-catcher league with 14 teams, which I was shocked by. I assumed he'd be in the mid-20s maybe.
Wow.
But he is one of my best surplus value keepers, actually, in a way that I didn't necessarily think so. I don't know if I agree with it, but it's what it says. He's significant, though. Vlad is more than $20 of value. Royce is actually not that significant of a good keep, according to those systems. I think they're probably factoring in less plate appearances. We'll see. But again, also, to be fair to Royce, with what they're saying, he wasn't special when he wasn't hurt the second half of last year. He was hot, hurt, and then good, but not great. Okay. Casas is kind of the same, where we saw one really good second half and then injuries last year, and we don't know for sure, but he's slightly a value. Butler is a good value. Doyle is a good value. Both are over $15. Cease is $9 of value, it says. Gilbert's 20. Sandy, it actually says, is 4.5. We'll see. That's probably the one I disagree with the most. I like Sandy a lot. I'll probably take $5 from Contreras, so I think is inflated, and put it on Sandy in my own head. We'll see. I'm also, for someone who's critical of Roman and to a lesser degree Zach, I have less roster spots to fill than either of them, but I only have $90 to do it. So it is going to be a tight web to weave as far as getting a couple legitimately useful players, but not only having $1 the rest of the way. I'm going to probably have a lot of $5 and $10 players on my team besides these guys. But I don't know. I think you guys are basically right. We don't have to talk about me too much more than that. I like our Houston, though. We all have me 3. But I'm replacing you guys with Raymond and Zach because they like me more.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I think it sounds like there's consensus for the next one.
Who's number 2?
Oh, we have 2 more. Never mind.
Yeah, I have Brendan number 2.
Is that what you got, Kyle?
Are we going with the person, or I guess it doesn't matter at this
Where
point.
do you have Brendan?
I have Brendan number 1.
I have Brendan 1 also. And then, let's see, he is 3rd for Zach. No, pardon me, 4th for Zach. 4th for Zach, and Raymond has him 3rd. So we all have him in the top 4. We'll intro with Raymond again, like that exercise for us. Brendan, 3. Nick Light. Nick Light has star power, Tucker and Riley, and a lot of young bats. Needs some players to take a big step to seriously contend, but sky is the limit. Okay, so Griffin, or I guess actually we're both ahead of you on Brendan, so why don't me and Kyle tell you why Brendan's better than you think?
Yeah, I mean, like Zach, Brendan has 3 first-rounders. Seemingly all the best prospects. He has 7 starting pitchers or starting players needed. So 7 players needed, not counting bench. And he's got $123 to spend.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's going to add a lot of value. And I think knowing Brendan, he's probably not going to spend the 123 evenly across those starting players. Like, he's going to pick up a couple really big pieces. So he might not even end with 3 first-rounders. He might have 4 plus another 3rd-round player. You know, like, I think he's already got a great team, even if you just filled this in with average players. But it's going to be a lot better after the draft.
Yeah, I mean, he is one for me because his position is just the one, if I was looking at our league, the one I would most want to adopt.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you can get multiple $35 players to fill out this team from here, and you already have so many amazing values. I mean, with the surplus value thing, Brendan has the most surplus dollars going into the draft at 190, which is just absurd. Second highest is 147, and then it's 147, 130, 125, 116. There's a lot of skew towards like low 100s, and then he has 190. Like
that's pretty crazy.
It is just disgusting, and it's not all a bunch of, like Kyle said. He's got sort of like Zach almost. With like, I think Zach had 3. His top 3 is probably better than Brendan's top 3, but Brendan's top 5 or 6 is better. Like, it's just crazy how deep the surplus value team is. I mean, Schwellenbach at pitcher is huge, and that wasn't even probably part of the plan until the end. DeGrom is slightly out of surplus value, and I personally probably like him even more than that. It's not even factoring in what I probably think DeGrom does till he breaks down. Robbie Ray is slightly at surplus. Corbin Carroll is one of the best keepers in the league. Gunnar is one of the best keepers in the league. Riley is still at a good surplus of more than $15. Chirio's at 30 of surplus. Langford is at 20 of surplus. Kyle Tucker's more than 20 of surplus.
And what's fun about Churio and Langford too is if they actually hit, then they fit into the Gunnar and Carroll categories. Like, they're probably the best keepers in the league, but you know, not like $20-$30 of surplus, but a lot more than that maybe. Sorry to interject.
No, you're good. I mean,
you know what I mean?
100%. It's going to be hard unless you just drastically overpays. And I just don't see him doing that for me not to feel even better probably after the draft, because having that core and then being also able to add at least 3 or 4 impact players, some good supporting systems, and then a bunch of $1 upside guys. Like, we said it a lot last year. Brendan did a really good job rebuilding, winning, rebuilding in 1 year, and now I already think he's the best team. Pretty crazy. Why is he not the best team though, Griffin?
Personal bias. Like, I'll admit it. It probably is bias. I do think if I was being objective, I probably would actually rank him first. But when you come on this pod, you have to rank yourself too high. So I gave myself a 1 spot bump. I do want to atone. I think I said something wrong last time I was on the podcast, like at the year end. I think that a possible tiebreaker between me and him, even though no one has us tied, would just be there's a lot of variance with this team. Like Carroll, Churio, Langford, and DeGrom are all like first, second, third round, fourth round picks in order. But there's just such a range of outcomes, So it's like I feel like you could argue he's the most likely to win it, but I'm the most likely to like finish top 2, if that makes sense. Like there's just more range of outcomes. But again, I mean, he probably does have the best team.
That might be true. What you just said, I think I might agree with that. I think, yeah, I would put betting odds the lowest for him to win. I don't know about top 2 even, just because it's so hard to project people's spike cases. Like someone's going to spike if it's not one of you two. But I do think you're more likely to be top 4 if things go wrong for both teams, just because you have so many. We'll get to you in a sec, but you do have a lot more guys. I'm confident in what they'll do. The range of outcomes is lower, even if it's not quite as high on the upside sides.
Yeah, Griffin is a little bit more like Charlie Brown on steroids with just kind of already established players. And then Brendan's just kind of doing his own thing. I mean, I had Brendan number 1, so obviously I like his situation. But one other thing to give Brendan some credit, we haven't talked since all of the roster cuts, but I thought he made the perfect decisions from like who he kept and who he didn't. There were a lot of players that I think, like Bobby Miller, Edward Cabrera, Dustin May, David Festa, Colt Keith, Logan O'Hoppe, Nolan Jones. I think there are a lot of players on that list and Shane Baz, I think, is actually another good one. A lot of players on that list where you could keep Colt Keith. You could keep even Dustin May if he's looking good, healthy, makes the rotation. And I don't think he has an option. I think he will. But I think it was right to cut those guys. But, it's easy to get attached to a couple of really good players. And a lot of guys on that list, they're really good. I think many people think Bobby Miller will have a bounce back year, even if he's not as good as he was. Could be fun to keep him, right? I'm sure that'll be a popular, nomination on draft day. But it's like, I think Brendan was smart with each decision he made. I think I would have probably made the exact same decisions.
Yeah. He's like optimal choice we were talking about with some of the teams that have less money and kept some guys we were on the fence about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might have not kept Brandon Woodruff, but at 7, I might have flopped him for Colt Keith. But again, it's all, all reasonable.
Felix Bautista too, by the way, is the biggest example of someone who does not pop on my just ranking and taking surplus value things. He doesn't even factor in. He actually thinks he's like at cost or a little bit over cost. I personally don't think that's the case. So I would even put him higher than the 190 I said he has, which is just kind of disgusting.
It is, yeah.
It's just what projections would say. If we run the league so much times, Griffin's probably right. Brendan probably wins most often. Maybe doesn't have the most consistent top 3 or top 5 finish outcome, but I just love where he's at. Good job, Brendan.
What's wild about that, though, is Bautista with NFBC was like top 40 for a while. So it's surprising that Bautista is that low in the projections.
Well, it's one other point, Kyle, you made. I meant to say something, forgot to do it because Griffin talked next when we talked about my team a second ago. I think the one sort of blind spot when I value NFBC ADP personally more than I value like the Fantrax stuff it shows us for those. And I think the one sort of caveat I'll make is obviously catchers. That's probably the biggest one. There's 2 catchers in that, so you can't even really look at that remotely, honestly. But because there's no IL spots and it's harder to sub guys in and out, I think guys like Acuna, you mentioned, is not necessarily going as high as you and I might take him. I think if it was for our league, his ADP would be higher than 28 or 29, whatever it is. He'd probably be not quite a fringe second, third rounder. And I think the same case would be made for Bautista, who is just more uncertain, but I think likelier to finish on the top 50% of the outcomes on the lower side. There's been talk sometimes like he might not be ready for spring or for opening day. Now it's looking like he probably will be, but I think a lot of the NFBC guys are just in general not quite pressing it as much as I would.
Good point.
Are we done on Brendan?
Well, I'll add again. I want to make it clear that if it weren't for bias, he's probably my number 1. But I have to commit to the bit. So
I cannot wait, guys, this camping trip. When you have to talk to him about this, he's going to be mad, dude. Not going to like that. I mean, you're the low guy of me and Kyle, who have him as the best team. You weren't the lowest overall, though. Raven had him 3, and Zach had him 4. So, even as big as me.
Huh. Well, that's indefensible.
Yeah. 2 is okay. 3 and 4 makes no sense.
Exactly. Even though I have 1 through 4 in the same tier, but
yeah,
ignore that.
Who was your favorite team?
Number 1, I had myself. I'm my own favorite.
Nice. It's good to love
yourself.
Why are you the one, I guess?
Well, wait. I mean, where did everyone else have me?
Oh, sorry. I have you 2.
I have Race Sync 4, and the main reason is because I didn't want to say anything mean to you about the Ohtani trade. So I just decided to make my rankings speak for the insult instead. No, so I did have you number 1 overall before the trade, but I moved you.
Nice.
I like it.
Before we start, for Raymond, you are 5. And for Zach, you are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
What? That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, you're 8.
I like that.
And I'll
That's
read
pretty wild.
Raymond and Zach 1 through 14. We can each read our 1 through 14. But yeah, you're 8 for Zach and 5 for Raymond. So they hate
have negative skew in a really favorable tranche for Griffin.
So Griffin actually might be the most variance we have. I thought it was
typical
Roman, then I thought it was a Eric, but I think maybe it's you, Griff.
Typical.
Yeah. But why are we wrong? Why are you the best team?
Wait, shouldn't I go last on myself?
Yeah.
If you want to, that's fine. Okay, here's why you're 2 then, I guess. I'll go first because I always make one of you guys go first. I like Griffin's team moderate outcomes, like you were saying. Griff probably the best. I am a little bit anxious. I get why you made the Ohtani trade, even if I wouldn't have done it, just because even after making it, 8 roster spots to fill, 3 more bench spots, so 5 starters, 3 bench spots, $55. You have the second most total surplus though, so good job there, even after the Ohtani trade. And just notably for all of them, I'll name them real quick. Contreras is $12 a surplus. Terang's more than $10. Mason Wynn's more than $5. Adames is more than $10. Jordan Alvarez is more than $30. Duran is almost $30. Teoscar is $11. Seiya is $10. Green is $5. Kikuchi is more than $5. Lopez is $8. Reagans is $20. And Framber is more than $5. So I like the security, which is, I mean, you're closer in surplus tier to me and Zach and Eric than you are to Brendan, which is, even though you're the highest, I probably even in a vacuum would have, if we were held the same number of surplus, liked you the best because you have the most guys that spread across. And just as someone who dealt with injuries last year, as a tiebreaker, I like that a lot. Like, you don't have to worry quite as much when you're Acuna and Strider go down because you don't have that quite as heavily weighted. I have you as the best pitching staff. Kyle said earlier you were, or someone else was his 1. I don't think he was trying to say you're not great. I'm sure he likes yours a lot too. I'm not saying that, Kyle. I just mean, for me, you were comfortably my best pitching staff, and you're basically filled out there too, so I feel good saying it's going to stay that way, unless someone just spends all their money on pitchers and maybe. I mean, your like 5th or 6th starter is better than some people's like 2nd or 1st even. We'll read your pitching staff and just like go over how nuts it is. But it's a scary way to build that way too. I was saying I love your risk spread across guys. I don't love building around pitchers. Your top 3 projected in all of them, I would have you as the best, but your top 3 projected in every pitching stat. Saves and holds is a little bit funky as far as projecting it, but you're 5th there. I would probably put you a little bit higher. I'm guessing it'll be higher than that. And then your top 3 in steals, but you're between 4th and 7th in all the other offensive categories, which I think is probably a little bit low personally, but not by a ton. Like, I don't think you're probably going to run away with any offensive categories. You're probably in the top half of contenders in it, which could be good, could be bad. I mean, you obviously want to win them, but like, you don't, when I say that, I mean to emphasize, I don't think you have any weak spots, which is good because you have a bunch of ways you can trade throughout the year or make pickups. Like, you're not, we mentioned Zach, for example, earlier. Not trying to pick on Zach, but Zach is probably overly powerful offensively and speed in a way that might make him less likely to take advantage of a surplus value guy like Bryce Terang or Mason Wynn this year, just because he might not be looking for those guys as much. He might take the chance on a random totally a type who hopefully works out too. I pick guys who worked out that when I do the example there. But you have a lot more ways you can continue to add and climb in intricate little 2 points here, 2 point there ways. And I like that for you. What about you, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, looking at Griffin's team, I feel like, Bryce Terang, Mason Wynn, Willie Damas, Teoscar, Suzuki, I really like I'm just kidding. But obviously, I like his team a lot. I agree. In my opinion, Griffin has the second best pitching group. I had Eric 1, and Eric's is incomplete, right? So we don't know exactly what will happen in the draft. And so I agree, is the point that Griffin has a really good pitching. Yeah, I mean, Griffin is one of my favorite teams. I think with players like Terang and players like all of these guys you named who have a high surplus value, I think you said it best earlier, Nick, it provides security, right? When you do that at scale, you're almost certain to have a good team. I think to have a winning team, it's tough because I know Ohtani has provided some sensational seasons, and you haven't gotten the number 1 spot in this league with Ohtani. But I think in order to win, sometimes you do need some of those spectacular players, and that's why I moved you down to 4. I think Jordan is spectacular. I think Duran could be spectacular, but I think you need kind of that top standard deviation season in order to really pull away. And I think all of these guys are capable of giving you that. You could easily win this year, but I think it's tough when you don't have the star power. And players like, I think Terang serve as the best example of what I'm trying to say. Even with surplus value, if you just assume whatever the average is or the middle, like the P50 for Terang, I think sometimes the projections maybe bite off too much of what these players have done, especially for speed. You can think a little bit about a John Birdie type player, and it makes sense after John Birdie steals 50 bags. Maybe you should throw that in to the projection as a really high end possibility. And I think sometimes it's easy to get swept away by those values. So I think it's tough. I think it is more likely than not Terang has more than 30 bags. That is more likely than not. And it makes sense that the projections land where they do. I just think that it's sometimes difficult to land your whole team on that style of player. And you haven't done that. You have really good talent. But that's kind of the point I was trying to make, why you're not number 1 for me.
I think a way to say slightly different than what Griffin said earlier, where I think we mostly agreed too, where if Brendan more often wins, but Griffin more often finishes in the top 3 or top 5, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think as someone who's just skull terrified of injuries now from last year, just shell shocked with injuries, if every team here in the top 14 teams, so all of them, just loses their top 5 players, or maybe even their top 3, Griffin might be my number 1.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And I'm not saying that's going to happen, obviously, but there is some security in that.
I agree with that. Yep.
So Griffin, why are you 1 though? What are me and Kyle missing?
Well, so other than bias of me being me, I mean, I mostly agree that I am relatively low upside, relatively safe with how this is built. I feel like we've been kind of biased by the fact that Kyle had the perfect pitching staff last year. You did a great job of doing your pitching staff last year. But if you apply that to Brendan, if Jacob deGrom was to go down, and he has to rely on Bubba Chandler, if he ends up being more of a 5.5 ERA pitcher for 8 starts rather than being Jared Jones, it's things go completely differently.
That's a good point.
So I feel like it is kind of scary to have injury risk, but I've kind of protected myself. So yeah, I pretty much agree. I'm likely to finish top 3, top 5, but I do need Brendan's pitching staff to do poorly or Jackson Churio do not as well. I need Nick, you to have more injury risk. I need Zach.
Why me? Hold on, keep me out of this, dude. I already paid my injury toll last year. I'm gonna have a healthy season.
Well, you're still paying the toll's on credit, so you're still kind of paying it. And I'm just going through my tier 1.
It's both knees. Come on.
Yeah, apparently. I love what Kyle was saying too. I mean, he dropped to 3 spots in the Ohtani trade. I would have had Brendan 1 anyway for what it's worth. It would have been closer, but not like it wouldn't have changed how I ranked the 1-2. But when we talked about this last week, I think it's super interesting. Like Griffin might, when the league is retired in 30 years because we're all too old or too dead or whatever, we just all been replaced by different owners. Griffin might, I feel confident saying, have the most top 3 or top 4 finishes ever, because Griffin just is like consistently. Brendan and Griffin are actually polar opposites, because Griffin is always going to finish really high and is like constantly sort of rebuilding, but like soft rebuilding. And like Brendan's either going to win or like punt everything, finish 12th, and then win again the next year, I feel like.
I agree.
I don't think having Ohtani would have maybe put you 1, but I do think I'd like you more with Ohtani.
I will say, like, part of what's hard for me is that I like to just think about the value and try to win trades by just like on paper value, which oftentimes involves taking on keepers. I forget where I was going with that.
Well, we've said a bunch of different positive ways of saying essentially that. We talked about with Nick making trades immediately, Raymond making the Ohtani trade, like being willing to take risky trades and make risky moves and cut bait early or cut bait when it's not even always the right choice. The process is good. Like, I think it's good. And I think when we talked about this either last pod or sometime fairly recently, that you were probably, for somebody who is usually contending the times I'm contending, I think you're my most reasonable trade partner. Just because I do think what you're saying about yourself is accurate. I think it's a good assessment. I think if you feel like it's 51-49 or 52-48, which most good trade offers should be, you do just do it, and you're pretty reasonable that way. It's hard to trade with somebody who has usually the same goals, and I feel like you're pretty good about doing it. Like I have no doubt what I'm trying to say is that if things don't start out perfectly for you, you'll be able to pivot and also better than the average owner make some moves.
Yeah, I don't think you're afraid to make trades. I agree.
I think you're almost too unafraid.
Well, actually, that reminds me. I think now that I moved Ohtani, because Ohtani has been the one piece where usually I turn over my entire team except for Ohtani. Mm-hmm. So now I'll be able to yearly turn over my team. Because I think last year he was the only piece, and now I have no remaining pieces, I don't think.
It seems like you've had Jordan for a while. Did you acquire him last year?
I don't know. Me and Brendan have traded him back and forth 3 times now.
I think you got him the year Brendan and I were really close. I think you've had him for more than a year.
Yeah, I kept him. I traded to Brendan, and then I got him right back. So,
okay.
You're right. He's just been going back and forth.
I like that Griffin's saying that because, like, we're all trying to win a fantasy league. Griffin's, like, finishing second or third every year and then doing side quests. Like...
So, Griffin, it seemed like you were going to make a point about keepers and kind of how you value keepers in this league. You mentioned making trades and looking at kind of the on-paper value. And it's interesting to hear, and I'd be curious if either of you have anything specific to say on it. But I kind of have started to think of any keeper league kind of like you value players like an options contract. Like you have to assign an extrinsic value and then the intrinsic value. And the intrinsic value is the easy part. That's the part where you're using a projection or whatever method you want to assign an actual value, a fair market value, a par value. And then anything below or above that par value is a discount or a premium, right? So we're looking at all the surplus values in this league, and Nick put together a really good list of all the best surpluses. But then the problem, well, not the problem, I guess like the fun part of the league is, in addition to the surplus, there's this additional premium that you have to underwrite somehow, which is the extrinsic value. And so that's the players like Corbin Carroll or Gunnar, who are on Brendan's team, like 2 of the best keepers in the league. You at some point choose to keep them for $6 and they're above their fair market value. Like when you're the first year you keep them for $6, they're not projected to be $5 or $6 players. They're like nothing. So I don't know. I don't know if that's where you're going with that, but like if you look at Duran and Otani, it's interesting because on paper, I would say that Otani has greater intrinsic value, but maybe you view the extrinsic value for Duran to be so much more because you could keep him for X number of years.
Yeah, so it partially is that. It's also partially just the fact that like I hate losing value. Like if I think Seiya Suzuki next year at $24 is a value, I want the option to be able to keep them. And my teams just started to get kind of expensive. I have a lot of people who are in the 30% rule. So just getting someone who's cheap and kind of resets that spot to like a low value kind of helps me fill out around that.
That makes sense.
I think where I was going with the keeper value is how I value that. But outside of 2022, I am usually in the top half, so it's hard to like totally rebuild. So that's why like, I do like the Soto and Jose Ramirez for Austin Riley. Like I try to keep a team that is always like decent. So even
it's worked out pretty good.
Except I haven't won, but I have a lot of silver and bronze medals.
Always the bridesmaid. Let me read you the Raymond thoughts on you too. I forgot to do that. Hold on a sec.
Good team. Good chance. Good.
This is Griffin. Okay. Griff, 5. So remember, he hated you.
Wow.
Us, and Zach hated you even more. But Raymond says, Griff, 5. A lot of intriguing guys locked up. Should be available to spend good money per slot available. Reagans, Duran, Jordan, excellent value. Very strong support cast.
I'm like all support cast.
That's why it's so strong, I guess. So I think we're mostly done with explaining why Griff's 1 or 2 for each of us. I mentioned earlier the struggles I had trying to find my 9, 10, 11. Was there anyone or like set of 2 or 3 you guys had the most trouble with?
I had a tough time with Jack. I mentioned that earlier. I put Jack down at 12, and I still think that's a ridiculous ranking. I think he should be higher, but I don't really know how. Like I think Nick said it well earlier. Like I would take the over on it, but at this point, it's hard for me to push him up.
Yeah.
What about you guys?
I think what you're saying with that, like we talked about, this is situation going into draft day as far as like where I'd want to be. And Jack, just because of, again, I think it was smart to do what he did last year. He finished higher than he made more money than he would have if he didn't go kind of all in or didn't pivot entirely like Brendan does last year or 2 of the last 3 years and just fully prepare for the following year to win. Like it was smart to go for it. It was smart to trade Casas for Lindor. It was smart to make some of the other trades he made, giving away like Christian Walker I like what he did, but as a result, he has to start doing the other side of it now for me to like his situation this year. It was hard for you, Griff. Anybody, or just it was all really easy?
It's kind of a cop-out, but 7 to 13, like all of Kyle, Charlie, Miz, Mark, Zink, Jack, and Brad, all 7, all 2, 4, 6, 7 of them were pretty equal, and it all comes down to like we were talking about Jack. If he traded Paul Skeens for Jose Ramirez, Zach Wheeler, and whoever else, he would be right there. And
yeah.
you really can't know how everyone's going to approach it.
Yeah, I mean, Paul Skeens is even better than, or he's probably around because he's a pitcher. Like, do you like Paul Skeens right now more than you liked Corbin Carroll going into last year? I think about like if Jack has a good but not great draft and then also trades Paul Skeens for Judge and Soto. Like he'd be immediately from like my bottom half to like my top half, I think probably.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they're right there.
Assuming he's a good draft round too, but yeah, I mean, I can't stress enough what Griffin just said too, where with the tiers thing, all but. And I think I may have misrepresented poor Brad in the beginning. Like I think Brad's chances are definitely not in the same tier as Nick's to win. He just was lower. Like I didn't have trouble moving him below Jack and whoever else I had in the bottom few. But it's still totally possible. And I'm not just saying being nice. I think we all sort of said a version of this. I think it's the most open it's been. And I think with good spikes in outcome variance, actually any of those top 13 could win. And I say that, and now Nick will probably win next rally.
That would be awesome.
That'd be a real. That'd be sick.
That would be.
It'd be funny. The auction just goes off, like no one logs in. Nick's just getting like $1 Jose Ramirez. It's like, hey man, it's a lock. Like no one logged in.
An hour early, just no one's there.
Yeah.
Idiots.
Oh,
Nick hires Jari Lee just to give us all viruses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One last thought. When the league is so wide open with all, really 13 teams who could compete, do you think that benefits stable teams or high upside teams who can like break out from the pack?
I do have a thought. I think if you play the game right, it benefits the high volatility players, because this is what Nick said earlier, like a player like Raymond, or I would throw myself into this category. If you go through the first month or so and determine that you're probably not going to win, if you're a high volatility team with a large range of outcomes, then you're in a better situation to sell all of your big pieces and play for next year.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. And I'm trying to ask Kyle saying it that's better than I would have said it, I think. I'm trying to think of whether I feel that way because I am generally that kind of a player too. I feel like I want to be more volatile. I think probably all three of us. Actually, I don't know if you do, Griffin, because I feel like we think we have the most secure core. Like you just said, you're all support. You're not really all support. You're all just really, really good players. But I think I'm trying to decide if it's my bias in the style I like to play is just what Kyle described, or if I actually just think it's better for everybody. Part of me thinks whichever you're more comfortable with is probably the way to go. But I also think even if that's the case, 60-40, I would say what Kyle just described is more optimal because you're going to be able to be in a spot where you can win next year that way, or you're going to spike a good outcome and compete for the money, or even just winning this year.
You could take the other side too. Like think about playing for overall versus playing for single season roto. And so at scale, single season roto, the Griffin strategy is always going to work better, right? Versus playing an overall where there's a competition of like 500 or 1,000 different teams and you're trying to be the best overall. You need high volatility for that. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is not even playing the full season with the players that you have, but it's more about capturing the upside off of the ability to keep and trade and do that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think if everyone had the exact same ability to draft, to assign value, if we were all playing the same way, I think you would still want some volatility in order to create differentiation.
The only, I think I may have misspoken or misrepresented what I was trying to say. It's just, if you're somebody, I don't think we have an example in the league of somebody, Charlie, I guess, is the closest thing I can think of. Like, let's just say Charlie is higher than we have in our minds and debating in the glob. And actually, he is in the glob, so he makes sense here to go for it or not. Like, I don't know. For Charlie, I think doing that might be playing more like left-handed, for example. Like, he might be less comfortable doing it. Might not be the way. And maybe playing more upside and aggressively. Because I do think personally it's the way to do it. Again, it's my personal preference too. I'm just trying to decide if I could make an argument the other way, and I don't think I can.
Nick brings up a good point. Like Charlie, if he's going to sell players off, you don't want him to sell Jackson Merrill.
Yeah.
That defeats the purpose of it. So who does he sell off? You don't want to sell off a $16 Tyler O'Neill, because I love Tyler O'Neill, but I don't know what you're really going to get back for that, you know?
Yeah. That's well said.
My thought was actually that I feel like if you have 13 teams who are all good, like you need more volatility that way to win.
Yeah.
Because like last year when it was me and Kyle, I mean, you were mostly my enemy. All I had to do was root for like Carlos Rodon. And he never did, but like, versus if I'm competing against 13 other, there's really 13 people. It's like, well, I know he's not going to have, one blow up run a season because there's someone right behind him who's just as good.
Yeah. It's almost like the regular season of fantasy football and then the playoffs of fantasy football. In that sense, I feel like. It's funny also hearing you say, like, you only had to root against Kyle. I feel like Kyle in that moment He's on mute, but I was waiting for Kyle to be like, "Oh, you're thinking about me? I don't think about you at all." Like, because Kyle was just. I think even if like the ERA of one of Kyle's guys was 9 the whole season, he would have won.
Yeah, that was mostly early in the season when I was.
I know.
My pitching also did fall off big time. So like Rodon started getting kind of Rodon-y, you know, like I don't know. I've missed on him because I traded away Michael King. Credit to Miz, I think. So I was wrong. You know, that's one where he started off pretty good. And didn't you and Miz nail that bet, Nick? You drew like the perfect line in the
Yeah,
sand.
we bet in April last year, Carlos Rodon over under 4 ERA, and it was like 3.95 or something. And I think it went under in like his second to last start. It was really close the whole way.
I was talking to Miz not too long ago about Rodon, just in the chat in Fantrax, and Miz called this out to me, and I didn't know it. But if you look at his splits per inning and just remove the first inning, it's
The second one.
Oh, go ahead.
The second inning is the second worst inning. I saw someone do this somewhere. I don't remember where it was, so sorry I can't credit it. But yeah, his ERA is
Crazy.
9 almost, right? It's like 7 or 8. And then I think it's like 5.5 in the second. And then I think it's bad again in the 6th or the 7th when you're getting fatigued. But it's amazing innings 3 through 5.
Yeah. It is kind of crazy. He seems like a very volatile guy. And I still like him. Yeah.
Well, even if I think, again, Mark beat me in that bet last year. So good job there, Miz. But even if I had won that because he gave up one more run in the last start or something like that, I changed my mind. I like Rodon a lot more than I did last year. Dude, great pod. That was sick. Let's real quick. Each of you read 1 through 14 just so it's easy for me at the end to find like where I can just aggregate them.
Deal. All right. I have Brendan 1, Eric 2, Nick Bucher 3, Griffin 4, Zach 5, myself 6, Roman 7, Gray 8, Brad 9, Miz 10, Spark 11, Jack 12, Charlie Brown 13, and New Nick 14.
All right, you two, Griff, what you got?
I have me 1, Brendan 2, Nick 3, Zach 4, Eric 5, Roman 6, Kyle 7, Charlie 8, Missigman 9, Menace 10, Ray 11, Jack 12, Brad 13, and New Nick 14.
Then I will quickly in a mouthful give you all 3 of me, Raymond, and Zach. So I am Brendan 1, Griffin 2, myself 3, Zach 4, Eric 5, Kyle 6, Missigman 7. Yes, Kyle? Oh, sorry. Okay.
Sorry, I was just trying to add reactions, but I raised my hand by accident.
Missigman 7, Sparky 8, Raymond 9, Charlie 10, Roman 11, Jack 12, Brad 13, New Nick 14. And then keeping score at home. Let me pull up theirs again. Sorry. My phone, I guess, updated itself while we were talking. We have for Raymond, Nick B1, Zach 2, Brendan 3, Kyle 4, Griffin 5, Raymond 6, Mark Minnis 7, Eric 8, Brad 9, Roman 10, Missigman 11, Stan 12, Charlie 13, New Nick 14. And then Zach had, pardon me as I clear my throat. He's got me number 1, himself 2, Eric 3, Brendan 4, Kyle 5, Roman 6, Charlie 7, Griffin 8, Raymond Zink 9, Stan 10, Brad 11, Missigman 12, Sparky 13, and then New Nick last. So was I wrong? Is it Roman or is it Griffin? Who has the highest range of outcomes or range of just different ranks?
Leave it in the comments, guys.
Yeah, let us know, I guess.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Notifications on.
Yeah, I don't know. Griffin's up there. Griffin and Roman are up there.
Because Raymond has Charlie second to last.
I have Charlie second to last.
Oh, you did too. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I have Charlie 10, so it's not that significant. Yeah, it's either Roman or Griffin, I think.
Eric is a big one too. I have Eric 2.
Although
Although
I'll take you with Eric, I guess, but obviously we just all thought he's amazing. Good job, Eric.
So this is where the positive and negative skew doesn't make any sense. So does that mean that I'm giving him positive skew because I have him up, or is that unfavorable skew? Like, RL needs to change the naming convention of that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Got to change it.
I thought positive skew is when there's like one outlier on the high end. So I think that's like there's a lot low and then a long tail.
But if there's one skew on the high end, that would create unfavorable, right?
I always zone out when Ariel Cohen talks about that.
Because
it's unclear. Like,
if everyone has the same,
is higher or lower than the average, and the median is lower than the average.
See, I'm always like, if I have the player, they're better than projections, and if someone else has them, they're worse than projections. It's like, that's all you have to do.
I even take it a step further. Like, if I need pitching, don't draft pitching this year. It's not worth very much. If I need steals are overvalued in this market.
My strategy is just don't get steals. Just find the guys who are going to start stealing for the first time in their career. If they're like 34 and they're like, yeah, I'm going to start stealing. That's what I like to do. Like guys like Devers, he's going to start stealing. Guys like Harper, he's going to start stealing. When they come for your spot, like, yeah, you have to DH now, Devers. That's when you start stealing. That's when you're like, yeah, I'm going to show you who can play third base.
Look how fast I was when I was at third base.
Exactly. Guys like Bo, he lost his luscious locks, so now he's going to start stealing again. It was weighing him down, all of his hair.
It's a free agent year for him, too, if he wants to prove he's healthy. Over, under in the auction, Kyle. What's your best guess? $25 for Bo Bichette?
I'd say over just because of the name value.
You're a missing
under?
I don't like Bo, but...
Yeah, I took the under with Mark. We made that bet.
He took over?
He said he'd go for more than 25, I think.
I'm with you, Miz.
You always are.
I think there's going to be a lot of those middle players that go for too much.
Yeah, I think that's the last 2 years the way I felt afterwards. I don't think I think it going in, but it just always happens. And then whenever players 40 through 60 will do that, and then players 65 will go for way too little, and just all go for too little.
See, I feel like the top end's going to go way high this year.
The top, yeah.
Just because we finally have like actual high-end players to get, and there's so many teams that need it. Like there's just so many teams that have like over $150 to spend. Who could convince themselves if I can successfully Kyle it, and if they just look at Soto and Judge and think that's what did it. Like, I think you could easily convince yourself that, how much money does Eric have?
Eric has, I have it written down right in front of me.
170.
Spots with 170.
So, like,
if
he just got two high-end players,
Yeah.
Like, if Wheeler went, or if Joe Ram and Lindor went for 75 on average, like, he'd have a pretty good team,
Yeah.
Yep.
So
yeah, you should do that.
That's why I think and hope that the high-end guys will go higher. If you're listening, you should spend a lot on high-end guys.
I can't buy any of them. I would like them to all go too much.
I think that's going to happen for the first handful of guys. And then I think like the second, third, fourth round type of guys will be a little bit discounted. And then I think like the true middle players will all be too expensive. Because everyone will panic. They're like, wait a second, I didn't get my guy.
That's so much money.
And then like that's where like the Ryan McMahons go for like $30 or whatever. You know? I feel like that's happened in the past.
Each of your draft philosophies, I know for me and Griffin, and even especially you, Griffin, it doesn't matter as much as we have less money going in. Would you rather end the draft with $8 remaining, or have the position where your last 7 players are all $1 players and you can't bid up to 2?
Wait, what's the question?
So you have your final 8 spots to fill in the draft. Would you rather have been a little bit too conservative with your budget and you can get guys to the point you have to leave the draft with $8 of your $350 on the table? Or would you rather have been a little bit too aggressive early and your last 7 spots are all $1 guys and you can't go up to 2 on them?
I'd rather have $8 $1 guys and not wasted anything.
I think I slightly lean that way too, but I feel like I used to really lean that way. And now, like the way it broke last year at the end, I was unintentionally kind of that way. And I love being able to get like Sandy for 2 and Woodruff, who I know I've traded since then for cheap. And It didn't work out because I didn't play last year, and I didn't do great with injuries anyway. I was like the worst guy to be drafting injured players, but I kind of think there's a benefit to that now more than I used to.
I think there's a huge benefit to that side.
Yeah.
I could totally eat my words and be wrong about the draft this year, but it seems that a lot of $1 players are actually $4 or $5 players.
Yeah. And being able to go the extra buck for them could be super useful.
Yeah.
We'll see. Fun philosophy question. We've gone for 2.5 hours. You guys have anything else?
Yeah, I'll keep talking. There's 10 teams that have over $100 max bid. That's the last thing.
It's pretty good.
No, I'm good.
Let's hit it. Let's hit 100. Has anyone ever hit $100 player?
It's going to happen inevitably because we keep raising the budget $10 a year, but no, I don't think so. I think the highest was it 90 for Jose Ramirez 2 years ago?
89.
I think 89 was the highest.
Was that the year I bought him?
Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe.
Actually, maybe it was 79 or 80. I'm not even sure we've had an $85 guy drafted.
It was 84 last year, right? I don't know.
I don't think anybody last year went for more than 80, but I think the year before someone did go for over 80. Could be wrong. I don't think we've even had 90 though. I think we will get our first 90 potentially. I'm still taking slightly on the under, but I could be wrong. I'm open to being wrong.
What do you think the chances we get 100? Maybe like a 25% chance?
100%.
What?
I mean, I honestly do. I just think
you think we're gonna hit it?
I think you have Jose Ramirez, Lindor, Mookie Betts, and then it's like you drop off to Trey Turner. So there's 3 like real higher end hitters, I'd say. And there's just so much money.
That's almost why I'd say it's not that likely this year though, just because I wouldn't do it on the first one nominated because there's 2 or 3 other guys in the same tier. Maybe the last one does. Whichever the top 3 or 4, whatever your tier break is, that's your best bet, I think. It won't be the first one, I don't think.
Well, and like for me, I exclusively follow the Fantrax ranking. So then, like you have Machado, then Semien, then
Mitch
Volpe.
Keller.
So like Volpe could go for 70, maybe. You know.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I think those top 3 have to go higher though, is because like Semien, Volpe, Freeman, Santander.
Yeah.
Probably more in the 40 range.
That's my favorite Sigmund thing. Whenever he's like, we're hanging out, he's like, hey, so I offered this guy this trade. I'm like, I don't think they're going to want to do that. And then he like pulls up his phone and he's like, but look at the Fantrax scores. Like this mid pitcher I'm offering for like their 3rd best hitter. It actually says I'm losing a buck of value. Like he might be interested now. And I'm like, I don't think he's interested in that. Like,
yeah, Volpe is ranked above Freeman.
duh.
Semien above Volpe. I don't know.
Ozzy Albies at 135. It's kind of weird.
That'll be his draft price?
No, he's ranked 135th.
Oh, that's also really weird. Never mind. I thought you were just
like
he's going to be the one to go high.
He's ranked right below Dansby Swanson.
I'll take the Albies side of that if you want to make that bet.
I'll take Albies too. I guess Kyle will take the bet.
Kyle, you want Dansby there?
Dansby over who?
Albies.
Ozzy.
Whoa. I like Dansby, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think it might only have him projected for like 350 at-bats. 400. That's why.
That still doesn't make sense to me, to be honest. I guess he's got less runs and RBIs just because of that, and that matters a lot just for one player. But there's no replacement value factored in.
Whose ranking is that?
Just Fantrax default for our league.
Yeah, so like the bat in our league has Ozzy as a $23.50 player, and Dansby is a $15 player. That seems appropriate.
So, yeah, actually, that's probably pretty close to what I would say. I mean, that's before inflation, I assume, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That does not. It just takes our league settings into account, not the. Nothing else. You're
doing the exact thing I did. Just essentially, I also took the time to write in like 107 keepers or whatever it is at the different dollar costs.
Damn.
I ran it a second time with the other project, whichever I did the first time, the opposite.
Now, you guys are a lot more fancy than I am. I usually just take NFBC's average auction value and double it. So yeah, that's close.
I mean, yours is a lot more efficient and probably 90% as good as mine.
That's called the Griffin Plus.
Well, it's kind of.
But again,
kind of like how you can put.
We're supposed to do 10 minutes and get that. I want to do the high upside choice, and then I'll either win or finish last.
Well, it's kind of similar to how you can put a lot of work in to create WRC plus, or you can just do OPS that doesn't even, it shares two stats added together that don't share the same denominator, and it does just as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, eh. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Griffin said that's it. We have any other takeaways?
Well, we're at 160 minutes. Do we want to go 170?
What's our
I feel like
longest?
the Skype.
This might be.
It's got to be this.
Yeah, this is probably it. Especially because
the
the
Skype format
breaks
doesn't help.
Yeah, the breaks are all together, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's true, actually.
the true time on the clock that we spend is actually being recorded.
Actually, yeah, I don't think we've ever had more than a 4 Zoom one. Those are only 40 minutes, so this would be the longest at 160.
Yeah.
You can see the look in Kyle's face, like, I have to edit this. Let's just
Don't
put up
edit
the
it
raw
all.
audio.
No, I don't have to do anything.
There's no ads or
Okay,
anything.
good.
Yeah.
Post it, yeah.
The only thing I have to do is like wait for it to download and like do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I already put together a fun intro.
Nice.
That's already done. But moving forward, I don't think we'll always have the fun intros. Sometimes we'll just have the boring intros.
The Genghis Khan was electric. That was so good. That was very funny.
Good.
I'm trying
Oh,
to like.
I have another thing.
Okay.
We didn't talk about the text that I sent Raymond in like May that I sent you, Kyle. I thought
Yeah.
it was funny, Nick. I sent him a text. I was like, what if I did Duran I basically offered him two whatevers for Kikuchi and Rengifo. And then it ended up that in the end I gave him Otani for Rengifo and Kikuchi.
I don't love that for you.
Yeah, me neither. I wouldn't do Otani
Let's
straight
do
up
it.
for.
Yeah, the
Ranking
text
forward.
says Duran and your favorite RP, Kikuchi and Rengifo.
This is last.
Yeah, whenever I made that trade with him,
Yeah.
it's kind of funny how it worked out to be Otani for two mid Angels.
Over
Kikuchi-
under 1.5 more years, Redden keeps Otani.
How many?
1.5 more from here. Over under.
Over.
Well, I'd take over with the injury risk, but I would take over still.
Yeah. I think I probably lean over too. I think just because there's a non-zero injury risk, it's probably higher because he plays both, all that, yada yada. Plus, if he I don't think he's gonna stop stealing, but let's just say he decided to stop stealing, suddenly that's 75 and then whatever he'd be, would he be 64 next year, something like that? 46 plus.
46.
He'd be in the low 60s, I
I
think.
think. Yeah.
So the year after that, when he's in the 80s, mid 80s, I'm not sure I'd pay if he's not running anymore.
He'd be 60, and then
78.
84, like Soto just did. Okay. Yeah, I mean, if he's not doing stuff, I can see a scenario where performance does it. It's more likely he just gets hurt, I guess.
Yeah, I would keep him for 2 years. But yeah, injury. I mean, if he's really going to be pitching as much as we all think, that increases the risk there. And that could be another reason why Griffin wanted to get out of that. Griffin explained how he likes to shift his exposure to younger, more dependable players. That definitely, this trade accomplished that with Duran. So that makes sense.
Remember this time a year
It was
ago
just kind of-
where it's Otani may have been embezzling money or stealing, and then I was in an actual NFBC, he's dropping out of the first round because he might get suspended, and then he was the best player basically ever.
That's what I thought Acuna was going to be this year with the injury concern. But it seems like the injury concern is slightly more real. But Acuna just continues to drop and drop and drop. It's I don't know, man. I think he's going to hit really well. And then when he does feel good, he will steal a lot of bases. I don't know. That's still my opinion.
Probably right. I think he misses probably most of April. And I don't think it's because he's even hurt. I think it's just because when he tore the other ACL, he probably rushed back a little bit too soon. And his performance was not special. And I think they're just really slow playing him because of it. I think when he comes back this time, he'll be ready. He tore this one a month earlier, and he's going to come back later than the first time, even though we've seen the videos of him running and stuff. And I think Kyle's right too that he'll probably have 12 steals at the All-Star break or something like that, maybe even less, and he'll probably end up with doubling it in the second half.
Yeah.
But maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. I hope he does. Maybe I'm just being optimistic.
That reminded me of one more thing. We didn't even mention Mike Trout on that list because he's probably projected for so few at-bats, but I think he'd go for probably as much or more than Trey Turner. I might have him going fourth most.
More than Trey Turner.
Ooh.
I think you could have Joe Ram, Lindor, Betts, and then among hitters have Trout like above Turner, Machado.
Griffin, you don't have enough money to be talking about Trout. Come on, you're not getting Trout.
Well, yeah, I'm not getting them.
I think Freddie Freeman goes for more than probably those other two.
Yes.
I know just had the bad news where it's like I might take some days off and like not run anymore, but like I have a feeling Freddie Freeman's still going to go in the top like 5 or 6 hitters.
He should.
All right, so you take Freeman, I take Trout. Who do you take, Kyle?
Who's going to go for more?
I would draft Freeman first too. Yeah, I am saying that.
You're asking who should go for more, Freeman or Trout?
Well, basically out of the leftovers of Turner, Machado, Freeman, Trout, Albies, Yelich, who would you have for the most out of
the most Freeman of all the ones you just named, I think. Either him or Trey.
Out of everyone you just named, I think Freeman would be the most. But I didn't really get a clear list, I guess.
True. So it's Trey Turner, Machado, Freeman, Albies, and Trout pretty much.
I think Freeman will go for a lot more than the others. I think Turner's up there for sure. Turner's probably second.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I think Freeman and Trey are closer to the top 4 than they are the other ones.
I agree.
Yeah, by ADP, you guys are
right. Top pitcher right there is Wheeler. Is that who it is?
Yeah, let's get Wheeler to go for 70.
Yeah, as somebody who won't be drafting an expensive pitcher, maybe he should go for 90.
90.
I mean,
maybe he should be the 100.
He went 69 last year, so
he should definitely go for more than 70. What am I saying?
Yeah, remember guys, inflation. So now he's like probably add a third to it. That's what he should go for this year.
Yep.
I think he goes over 70.
He will actually.
Yeah,
you're definitely right.
Me too. Probably not a ton more, but he probably will. I'm trying to think if I had I probably have to pick someone random who's not one of our 3 rosters who has, or I guess maybe Kyle's roster, but Kyle's a lot of pitchers kept, so it doesn't make sense for this. Like if I had a roster with half my money left and half my spots to fill and just equally spread out so far across hitting and pitching, I'd probably pay high 60s, low 70s for him. But probably not much more than that.
I mean, he's kind of the only true ace, you could draft. Like you have Aaron Nola, Garrett Cole, Castillo.
Yeah, they're all.
But Wheeler's just I think Wheeler's just in his own tier of stability.
I like Cole and Castillo a lot still. I think they're ranked pretty low this year. And honestly, Gausman, I think could be better than what people think.
Yeah.
I think we should start talking up all the pitchers. We should just talk about how good they are. I think Mackenzie Gore is really good. I wanted to keep him, but he was too expensive.
I think if you're looking for a way to make an impact, I kept Sean Manaea, but now he's hurt. So if you want to trade for him, I'd be willing to do it for just not your best player anymore, your 3rd best player.
See, now I'm debating if I should drop Heel, and I'm like, would I trade him for Manaea? I feel like that's pretty fair right now.
It's easy, people don't get excited about Ranger Suarez, but think of the results.
People don't get up in the morning and say, I'm so glad I have Mitch Keller, but they should.
Hey, Charlie Morton, he's got a starting job. Let's get excited.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be a reason they have Michael Wacha ahead of Freddie Freeman, and I just don't think we are factoring in. We're not valuing Wacha enough.
Defer to authority on that one.
What?
I think it's important we just defer to authority and trust that probably Wacha is better. We're just missing something.
Do you think we have many listeners left?
No, but we hit whatever the 170 was. I think I'm going to call it.
I think I'm ready to.
I still have 2 more hours I could go.
What? You want to do the power rankings again, but this time front to back?
Well, I was going to do power rankings based on let's power rank based on where we see everyone in 3 years now.
Okay, I'll do it for like a minute. Let's do it.
I don't have that. Number 1, Brendan.
Yeah.
Number 2, Eric.
Yeah.
That's it.
Number 3.
Ray.
Yeah, maybe.
Zach.
Gotta
Yeah,
throw
Raymond is 3.
I think Zach's in there with Ellie, if you think Ellie continues.
And Bobby Wood's still probably going to be fine.
Honestly, if you're factoring 3 years, it's almost like you only care about people like Skeens. It's like.
Yeah, I can only assume, but I also have to assume we're making rational choices generally. Like, we'll find a couple guys who pop up. I don't know, it's hard. I don't know if I feel comfortable with anybody other than, I do agree with you that it's 1, 2, Brendan, Eric. Just because I already like enough of their guys. Like, they have a few already. You basically have to say who has more than one top 30 or 40 player at $6 or $11. And then you have to assume they won't get hurt.
That only was 2 minutes. All right, maybe I don't have 2 more hours of content.
I don't think Kyle wants to play. I think we're good. Kyle, look at that face, dude. All right.
It's like, I don't know if we'll like baseball in 3 years. It's like.
Thanks for listening. Send us your power ranks. Send us where we're wrong, where we're high. That was fun, guys. I appreciate you.
That was a blast.
Good
Thanks, guys.
times.
Talk to you later.
Comment if you made
Yeah.
it this far.
Hit the like.
Subscribe.